Hello, everyone. It's been a hot minute. Had a few things happening I'll get into in just a little bit as to why I've been absent. But welcome, cheese, guitar, and amp aficionados from around the world. And I guess this episode will be Lyle tries to remember things about amplifiers because Lyle hasn't touched an amplifier very much in the last 2 weeks. Lyle's been busy. My mother's had some recurring health issues, and so I spent a lot of time taking her to and from doctor's offices, which culminated in the excitement of open heart surgery, 4 bypasses, and she's doing really well. So that was one side of things. At the other side, we had already booked a trip out to just south of Phoenix, about an hour south of Phoenix, to visit my mother-in-law and one of my fathers-in-law. Well, one of my mother's-in-laws, one of my fathers-in-laws, Nikki's mom and stepdad, because the stepdad hasn't been doing so hot, and we wanted to spend some time with him as well. So, between doing stuff like that, and I was with mom for like 18,000 doctor's appointments and hospital evaluations that took 14 hours at a time, and then the surgery, and then the initial ICU fun stuff, and then when she was stabilized, there wasn't much I could do for a while, so that's when we did the Arizona leg, and then when I got back is when she came home, and so my wife and I have been both together and separately spending a lot of time with her over there. But the amps will return. I've got some cool ones to do for you guys. But, mom's doing great. 4 new arteries later, or 4 transposed arteries later, however you want to count it. But, it's amazing what they can do now. My grandfather had open heart surgery in '82. And in comparison, it was utterly barbaric, and complications of the vein graft that they did on his leg led to his ultimate demise within a year and a half. It's a much more sophisticated surgery these days, though mom was not too happy about how she felt afterwards. But good prognosis, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks for all the well wishes I'm seeing on the screen and the kind words. I've just been a little out of sorts. I've not been upset or anything. It's been a lot. The good news, which we might get to towards the very end of the stream, is that in the early mornings in Arizona, because my in-laws did not get up too early, and it was hot later in the day, I was getting up early and going for some photo shoots in and around the desert there in the Sonora Desert, and I got some nice things. And then come 9 or 10 o'clock, we go to their house and do everything with them until it was time for dinner about 4:30 in the afternoon. Living on a different schedule. But Arizona is, with the exception of Phoenix, is beautiful. To those of you who live in Phoenix, I apologize. I have not seen all of your magnificent city. In fact, I would say that I've not seen any of the magnificent bits because we were just in the downtown, just around the corner from the airport for an hour and a half or so. I had been to Scottsdale before, and there's some cool stuff there. But I am not going to say all of Phoenix is bad, just the parts downtown that they want you to see. Looks like just the bad bits of Nashville and none of the good bits. Only hotter. Let's see if I have any questions. Hey there, Alan from Berlin. Greg Brown, Jeff Harper. Hey, Jeff Harper. My thoughts on the StewMac kits. As far as I know, they are exactly the same kits and done in collaboration with Mojotone, so they're the same as the Mojotone kits. So they are very good if they're built right. Glad to hear you're doing better, Victor. And Jeff just finished some cardiac rehab. You go, man. You go. And yeah, I saw Brad had some cool amps in for once, and he seemed to be doing a good job with them. No surprise there. So I, if I keep having family emergencies, I'm going to lose all my audience to Australia. Hey there, Martin. Appreciate you. Smoke alarm. Did it go off or did it do a test? Neither one of it is acceptable when you're trying to sleep. But hey, Cat's music journey, Catalan. It was a good trip. Tempered for that. The primary purpose was to spend time with people who don't have a lot of energy and don't really want to leave the house that much. And on one level, it's hard to blame them. It's very hot there, though. Arizona was having our weather. It wasn't as hot as it often is. Usually I'll go there, it's 112, 114 degrees, but zero humidity. So as soon as you step in the shade, you're fine. But they were having Memphis heat, which is about 100 to 105 degrees before the heat index, and then add 80%. I guess they're like 70% humidity. We get up to like 80, 90%. So Memphis is still hotter, but I'm gonna let New Orleans and Houston argue over who wins. But it was not a pleasant week to be in Arizona. Though we did get dust storms, haboobs, and monsoon rains, so that was kind of cool. The shadow knows, yes. Did I ever work with the Fishman Strat backplate battery pack? Has 3 wires. I don't know how I can use it to power a 9 volt onboard clean boost on a Strat. One of them seems to be some control wire. I've not ever played around with that. The battery pack, if it's got 3 wires, maybe they've got it tapped so they can do 9 or 18 or 9 or 4.5 volts. I don't know. I've not played around with it. Sorry. DC is pretty easy to sort out, so maybe they've got a control wire to connect to Fishman's stuff. I don't know. I've not played around with that. Brad would probably be a better option for that. Brad does more guitar stuff than I do. I do appreciate everyone saying nice things to and about my mom. Board Chords is doing some light workouts, changing speakers in his 4x12 and 3x12. I have been there. Righty tighty. Someone's selling 65 Bandmaster for about $2,000. Seller says it hums a bit because it's how those amps are supposed to be. Worth considering, or should I stay away? Well, I don't know about the vintage market value this week because it keeps fluctuating. But if you don't need reverb, a Bandmaster is a phenomenal amp. A 65 is going to be a great example of it. And it would not hum in the slightest if it were restored the way that Brad and I and others that get mentioned on the channel do this. People think that vintage amps hum, that vintage amps buzz, that vintage amps are noisy. No, old things do that. They never did it in 1965. They were designed not to do that, and that's why everything in it was designed to be, everything that would wear out was predictably was designed to be easily replaced so that it would not hum. So you need to find it. If you want to get it, it's a good choice of an amp. It will be a fantastic choice if the transformers are original, and any good tech can teach it the words. T777 grew up in and around Phoenix and have no interest in returning. Yeah. I did not find it an architecturally interesting city. Though I was only in the downtown area, I saw that there was an arts district that away, but we had to go that way. So next time we're down there, I might spend a little more time investigating Phoenix. I was interested in how little it reflected, at least what the rest of us think of as desert culture. Just like Nashville plopped down in the middle of a desert. Odd. Hey, Satchmo. Man, Glad you're not elbow deep in a nightmare. Glad you're here, and I'm sorry your mom's having issues. You know, we all have these things to look forward to. Oh, and in the middle of all this, my great aunt died, with whom I was very close. Now, that's less of a sadness because she was 97 and had been fading very hard the last 3 to 5 years and had dementia. And so it's kind of a relief, but I did attend the funeral Thursday and helped organize things and stuff and was there for my cousins, whom I love very much. So that was another level to Lyle's 2 weeks of family ties. All that, and still didn't get Mallory. Damn it. Some of you will get that. Hey, Bill. Last night gigging, or giggling. I prefer to think that you were giggling last night. My other guitar player uses a PV Delta Blues. Amp was doing low feedback, increasing louder when nothing plugged in. It only stopped when I Fonzied it. Microphonic tubes? Most likely. Microphonic tubes are a broken solder joint, but the tubes are very likely. The trouble with the Delta Blues is that it has hang-down tubes in the back with no support for them, and they get angled from the retainers. They can get pushed on in transit. It's got a really flexible back panel back there. It does almost nothing. It's just really common for the tubes to get banged around in the Delta Blues and the Classic 30. Where do I land in the 60s blackface Princeton reverb rectifier debate? GZ34 versus 5U4GB, tube chart versus schematic. Well, it's really easy. There's no debate. In 1964, when that amp was designed, wall voltages were lower. In order to get the preamp voltages and the B plus in general in that amp where it's going to sound its best, if you have 114 to 117 volts coming out of the wall, you want to have a GZ34. If you're using modern wall voltages, well above 117, say 120 to, well, right now it's 119, 120 in Memphis today, but it could be 125 some other days. Well, that's going to give you a really high B plus. And so what you can do is use a 5U4GB, it's give you a 30 volt drop, and get you right back in the range that you want the amp to operate in. That's all. That's the difference, how much your B plus you have. There's some other things that don't really factor into it. I mean, they're technically true, but the gist of it is, hey, Fender realized that about 1969 that US wall voltages were going up. Rather than choosing a different power transformer for all the amps that they were already making, they just changed from using a GZ34 to using a 5U4GB and kept on motoring. And all the amps from 1971 worked the same as the ones from 1965, even though the wall voltages was increased. So not really much of a debate. The people on the internet, in any specialized form, you know, guitar amps, etc., love to debate, love to find a hill and die on it. And life is short, and that kind of stuff is boring to me. It's just a pragmatic choice. Hey, Bottom Kitchen. I damn near burnt my fingers turning off the power switch. Vibrolux Reverb, that's got a tube rectifier, which generates an awful lot of heat. It's got a pair of L6s, which generate an awful lot of heat. If you had a short in the speaker jack, you just wouldn't have any sound because you'd have an infinite load. You just wouldn't hear anything. It's possible your voltages have gone really high and your heater voltage has exceeded 6.7, 6.8 volts. It's also possible that it's just warmer this time of year and the radiant heat from the tubes just heated up the chassis. But, you know, if you want to get it checked out by a tech, I would say if you had anything really wrong in that amp, enough to cause that much heat, if it was an electrical, if, you know, the fuse would say, hey, I can't, this is running hot because there's so much current. Let's limit that and shut off the fuse. So it could be within the realm of the normal. Remember that tubes are designed to run at temperatures that will burn our wee little fingers. And so don't touch them. And sometimes the radiant heat really does get the power transformer warm, gets the chassis warm, and if it's on for many, many hours, it can get to the point where in that area, the power switch is right above the power tubes, it can get uncomfortably hot. Doesn't happen very often, but it can. So it doesn't mean that there is something wrong with your amp, but it's well worth checking out. And remember, you can always pull one preamp tube and measure pin 4 to pin 9 or pin 5 to pin 9 with a meter set to read AC and with the amps on, and you don't have to pull the chassis out, and you can see what your heater voltage is. Notice that I say pull a preamp tube to do that, because one preamp tube will barely affect the voltage present on the filament supply, the heater supply. If you pull a power tube to do that, first of all, the amp will sound real bad with only one power tube missing. Second of all, the power tubes draw enough current that you'd have an artificially high heater supply voltage. So do that with a preamp tube. And unless you want to pull the chassis, then you can measure with all the tubes in place and operational. It's up to you. Thanks, Oscar Dad. Appreciate that. Do I have any experience with the Weber Mass 200 attenuator? Well, Bill, no. Weber has always made really good speakers. And everything else with that name on it has been really crappy in my experience. All their kits are bad, their chassis are bad, their transformers are bad, their pots are bad. And so I've only ever gone to them for switches. I mean, not for switches, for speakers. And I have never tried any of their attenuators, because that is certainly a product where you have to get things right. And given their track record with other things, mechanical and electrical, I have not trusted them enough to try one. Hopefully they're great and I'm just wrong. But I back in the day, I would say THD hot plate they're good for a reason. Now there are a lot of other options, including reactive loads. I would look at SUR. I would look at aux box. I would not look at. I myself would not trust the Weber. Hey, Almarino, just picked up a very waxy Master Volume 74 quad reverb. I hope you put it right back down. That's one of the heaviest amps ever. I mean, the Super 6 is worse, but the quad's pretty impressive. What kind of changes would you do to get it just right? This will be the first part of the list will be the same whether it's a 74 or 64. So electrolytic caps. Making sure that all ceramic disc caps are not leaking DC. That's not that common, but it happens. Making sure any bright caps on the switches are actually effective, because those caps over the years absorb moisture and their capacitance drops, and you get bright modes that don't do anything or do barely anything. I would make sure that all the pots are clean and that all the grounds are good. I would disconnect the physical heater center tap if present, and put in some 100 ohm resistors, make an artificial center tap to protect the power transformer in case of a heater short. I would clean all the sockets, retension any sockets as necessary, and then I'd turn my attention to where it differs between 64 and 74. Up to about 72, I would just make sure that there was no DC present in the board, and if I found some, I'd get the solder out of an eyelet, soak that area in isopropyl, heat it all up. The isopropyl goes into the board, displaces any water, forces the water out, then you heat it up, and then all the alcohol evaporates out, and you can get rid of all the DC in the board. Post 73, they have a lot of wax, as you've discovered. And so I've got to remove a bunch of wax, which also becomes conductive, and then I do the isopropyl, and I've shown that in videos. And then on a 74, I would also want to shorten all the lead dress, because it's got all the spaghetti with the white wire, everything way longer than necessary. On the master volume, I don't think the 74 has got a push-pull boost, but it has the master volume. I would disconnect the bright cap that's on the master volume, because it kills the sound of it. And I would make sure once all the lead dress is cleaned up and neatened, then I would remove if present, 2,000 picofarad caps from grid to ground on the output tubes. possibly any extraneous caps on the reverb circuit around the tube or the RCA jack as well. Though those are usually kind of nice to have, but the ones from grid to ground were there to prevent the amp from oscillating because the wiring was so bad. And if you go through there and spend 2 hours neatening up, shortening and neatening up all the wire connections, you don't have the oscillation to dump to chassis anyway. That's what I would do. Some kind of a sandstorm. Well, it starts off as a sandstorm. You see it off in the distance, like a brown cloud coming at you. And as it comes, the wind hits you first, and sometimes it has some rain in it, and then all of a sudden the wind starts to have light particles of dust and grit. And if you're smart at that point, you go inside or get in a car. And when the whole thing hits you, especially if you're out on the highway when it hits you, you've just got to pull over because it'll go pitch black. You won't see anything in the world. You can be in a car with your headlights on, and the headlights only illuminate about a foot or two. It's just in immense quantities of dust. And then it blows over in 5 to 10 minutes. Well, it blows past you at any rate, and you hope your car finishes okay. I imagine that there are people, ranchers and such, who have gotten caught out in them, and I imagine all you can do is lay down, hopefully in a ditch, and put a bandana over your face and wait for it to go. Yeah, I mean, it's some biblical type shit, you know. I'm waiting for the locusts. Hey, Lovecrafty. Yeah, I thought about that, but you'd only need two connections on a battery pack. For the ground just goes to the ring, and the hot goes to the battery. Normally, that's how that would work. So it's the third conductor that I don't know what's going on, unless they're doing something really complicated, which they likely are, because I know they've got all kinds of circuitry in the current Fishman stuff. But in terms of a battery pack, that third wire may be unnecessary. Oh, you know, I don't know which is sillier, Haboob or Willy Willy. I think Willy Willy, when said in an Australian accent, is about as silly as it gets. Let's see. Hey, Robert. What resources would I recommend to train your ear to discern the frequency differences of lower mids, upper mids, etc., as it relates to speaker types that are known for those ranges? Huh. That's an interesting question. Well, there are ear training apps you can get for your phone. Where it'll play a sine wave or a square wave, and you try to identify what it is. Not in terms of, oh, that's an E flat, but in terms of, oh, that's got to be somewhere around 400 hertz. That's got to be down around 200 hertz. I don't know of a tried and true method. I'm probably the wrong person to ask. Maybe if Dustin gets on here, Dustin does live sound, he might have been trained in that or trained people in that. I did ear training in music theory classes in college. And so for me, I think I think the frequency is interlocked with my perception of pitch. Yeah, and Brad's suggestion of there getting an EQ plugin, though I would suggest that a graphic is useful. I think you really can hear things better with a parametric if you know how to use it. But for me, that kind of thing is related to pitch, and it's related to timbre because I'm approaching all that from a musician's perspective. Hey, that's I mean, I can listen to something and literally my thought process is that's got like way too much clarinet in it. So look around 800 hertz, 600 hertz area. So I'm probably the worst person to tell you that. I can tell you how to recognize an Italian third or an Italian six, or at least I could back when I was doing all those classes every morning. It's amazing how far your ear progresses when you train it repeatedly. But um, again, I'm just going to say I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I wish I had a really great answer for that because it's a really great question. And I love that you're asking that question. If you will find the best answer, and if you go down that path, you'll learn an awful lot. But yeah, there's nothing wrong. If you had a signal generator app on your phone, which I've got, and you can also play around with the graphic EQ plugin or a parametric plugin and just sweep through music that you know real well and say, oh, I never realized how much of this frequency is here or how much I dislike this frequency. A lot of what we do is well, I'm not going to say never, but people who've been doing this for a while rarely say, I like that, more of that. They usually go through very judiciously and say, all right, this is a problem frequency. This sounds ugly. I'm going to lower this, or that's fine, but that frequency really needs to belong to the attack of the kick drum. So I'm going to just notch that out of this organ so the kick drum doesn't get clouded up by the other thing. But you can get, let's see here. Just a second. It's worth it, I promise. Just got to find where I put it. You get a signal generator and say, all right, let's see what 250 hertz sounds like. Let's see what 100 hertz sounds like. Now, you're not going to hear that through this speaker, are you? Because the phone speaker can't reproduce those. It's a bad choice. Let me go up in range a little bit more to where the phone can do. Because the cell phone, both the speakers and what we hear, are kind of like a traditional phone, and that they are aimed at the frequencies the human voice uses. That's 2.5K. That's 2K. 1.25K. You can do that kind of stuff. Or you can do full range, which I'm not going to do right now because it would just sound like... But you can do that with sawtooth. You can do sines. Here's an 800 hertz sine wave. Triangle. Square. Sawtooth. And now you're ready to get into synthesis. But anyway, let's find out what 18 kilohertz sounds like and make the teenagers scream. Well, Alan, I think very few people in the chat would hear the 18 kilohertz, and I'm not sure that YouTube's compression would let it come through. But let's find out. Let's call up an 18K signal generator, sine wave, and this will be fun. Actually, this only goes to 12,690, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sorry, this app maxes out at 12,690, which I bet some people here... Oh, no, it doesn't. Sorry, now I'm seeing now. All right. Sorry, I hadn't used this range of the app before because it's not that useful very often. So we were doing for 18K. Let me see if I can type it. All right, sine wave. Hands up. Who can hear this? I hear that something is happening, but I don't really hear anything. Let's go to 14.8. Yeah, all right, my dog is complaining in the other room. I don't think the speaker can do it. All right, this iPhone speaker seems to max out just above 12K. You can hear that. I can hear this. This is 10. This is 10K. And then the speaker starts to go away. I think the speaker itself can't reproduce it the same way. If I were to play it through these, the HS7s, we'd hear it. You want me to go back to 14K? All right. All right, 13. Yeah, this is 14K, roughly. So I think we're running into limitations of this little speaker. I hear something, but it's not like working. Anyone out there with tinnitus, I really apologize for what we might have just done to you. Here's a good here's the real test for anyone out there who's been playing guitar a long time. Can you hear this? If anyone can't hear that, you need to go to an audiologist. That was 5K. That's about it. That's about the highest frequency that your guitar speakers can cleanly reproduce. If you didn't hear that last bit, get your ears checked. You need some help. All right, let's see. Brad's the man for answering questions about cabinet covers. I just do little bits of retolexing. I don't often do the full thing. Though I've heard good things about various contact cements. Know anything about current production smaller magnetone combo amps? Any concerns regarding construction or components used? Hey Danielle, I've only had one model of the very small combos in. It was basically their variant on an AC15, and everything was fine except that they had biased it too hot. They had it biased at idle like 19 watts. I changed out the bias resistor so that the amp was biasing about 13, 14 watts at idle, and it stopped eating tubes. So in terms of the construction, great. In terms of the components used, great. In terms of ability to read a data sheet, like many, they don't understand cathode bias, but that was easily fixed with one resistor and a couple pairs of new tubes. I have no experience with Loctile amps. Sorry, Matthew Lynn. Hey, Sire. I have been inside a Two-Rock. How does the circuit and tone differ in a traditional blackface amp versus a more Dumble-esque style amp? It's a tricky one because the clean is much the same. Dumble does their tone stack differently than Fender did, but the Dumble is a variant of the Fender. But in terms of what the Dumble is, it's essentially the normal channel of a Fender amp. With the mids are done slightly differently. For the most part, that's all it is. There's some local negative feedback stuff happening, which gives it a slightly different character, not tremendously. The main thing about the Dumble is that it then takes that same clean sound, post EQ, and then adds and overdrives it, and then depending on the model, gives additional overdrive tonal controls to it. And so it's an interesting gain structure. I think he derived it from like the 61 Bassman, which is much the same thing that Trainwreck did. The Trainwreck, I think, might have been more inspired by the 63 or 65. Certainly a lot more gain. Waiting to see what people say about the frequencies. Hey, cool, Richard. Tube expander core. Do you need a Waza tube expander core for your pink taco? Sorry. Some of the product names make me do the voice. Just a second, Victor. My Germino Lead 35 has 6v6s. It has a Stancor copy transformer, normally fitted with EL34. It has a bias adjustment pot and a resistor to read, take measurements from. Is it millivolts or milliamps? Well, that is a really good question, Victor. And usually, depending on who did that circuit, and I bet Greg did it right, it'll be both millivolts and milliamps, because it'll be typically a 1 ohm resistor that you're measuring across. And so the voltages will directly correlate to the millivolts will directly, the voltage will directly correlate to current, because it's the one there. So if you read 35 millivolts, you have 35 milliamps. Some people, when they design those circuits, will use a 2 ohm resistor or a 47 ohm resistor or something, which just makes things more complicated. I imagine Greg, in his wisdom, used a 1 ohm resistor, and so whatever you read in millivolts will translate directly to milliamps. Thoughts on 5F10 Harvard versus 5E3 Deluxe? Hey, Matt Mayhem. And or cathode versus fixed bias and tweeds. Well, they're very similar amps. Basically, the Harvard is just one channel of the 5E3 with a 10-inch speaker instead of a 12. I like both. I think that is such a Mary Ann versus Ginger setup that only you can answer that for yourself. You know, they each have great pros. They each have a few cons. If you have an opportunity to play either, you would like it. I mean, if you like one, you'd like the other. If you had both and you played both for a while, you might say, that's the one I want to go home with. But you would not hate the other one. And they're more alike than they are different. And our cathode versus fixed bias and tweeds, well, that's not... I'm unaware of any tweed Fender where the only difference was the output cathode versus fixed bias. The cathode biased amps tend to be the smaller amps with 6v6s or earlier amps, often with cathodiene, or earlier than that, paraphase phase inverters. Whereas when they came out with the 5E3, the 5E3, sorry, not the 5E3, the 5F6A and the 5E8, and the big ones with multiple output tubes, they also went to a long-tailed pair, and that's when we went to fixed bias to get a louder, more powerful, cleaner sound. So that's not Mary Ann to Ginger. That's, I don't know. I don't know what the comparison would be. Porsche versus F14. They're both awesome. They do different things. One of them will fit in your garage. Yeah, that red color, dark red, which can be brown if the sun hits it differently. You get that, like, is Charlton Heston standing around here kind of vibe. Yul Brynner, stay back. I guess I'm really making myself sound old with those references. Yeah, you got that right, Alan. I've never heard Olivia Newton-John say anything that sounded silly to me. But everything Brad says, it's strange. Thank you, Mr. Steve. Appreciate you there. Hope you're enjoying that Princeton now. And I think, Steve, this belongs to you because we changed your reverb driver tube and I forgot to put that back in. So next time I see you, I've got it. It's a reverb driver. You won't hear any difference with or without this, but I didn't want you thinking that I was stealing your tube covers. I actually have a couple hundred of these things floating around from amps that were abandoned, people who didn't want to have tube shields, etc., etc. But this one was and will be again yours. Yeah, Satchmo. Sometimes I see 10 ohm resistors and I'm like, well, that's just doesn't do any one any good to make it more complicated. But you know, Greg Germino knows what he's doing. I can't imagine. I could call him right now, but I'm gonna let him have a Saturday. Some of us need to have one, right? But I'm sure it's probably a 1 ohm in his, because that's the logical choice. You don't need any actual resistance there. It's just cathode. There's not much current. You just need enough to measure it. And 1 ohm, particularly if it's a 1% tolerance metal oxide, it's just such a nice thing. Hello, RS string of numbers. Did Marshall use pin 1 for tag points on EL84 sockets for grid resistors in the 1974 18-watt amps? The MT kit does, and I realized after a loud hum that old RCA EL84s connect pins 1 and 2 internally. Well, you will have a very loud hum. I don't remember. I mean, I had a 66 in not that long ago. I've had Marshall 18 watts in from the era, and I don't remember if they had pins 1 and 2 used, or whether they went to pin 1 and then, or just went straight to pin 2. I can tell you, as you've discovered, that the tubes made since a long time ago do not have pins 1 and 2 tied together, and that you very much do need to have the grid connected to pin 2. I don't recall whether Marshall did that or not. I don't know what the MT kit is, but if the MT kit has them, tells you to tie them to pin 1, then they need to be slapped around the ears a little bit, because that's a good way to get wildly oscillating output sections like you have there, where the tube's just going to go into runoff. But they've probably survived unless you let it run for an hour. A Real American 1775. Due to chassis space concerns and a scratched tweed build, I have to run the output transformer primaries and secondaries down across the chassis to the tube sockets. What are the main lead dress concerns? Thanks. Well, you're not going to have much of an issue with your secondaries, because the secondaries have no appreciable voltage and relatively low current. They're just not going to, and you can tightly twist them, and they're not going to want to inject themselves into anything else. It's the primaries that are that you really want to keep away from any of your AC signal wires. So, down across the chassis to the tube sockets. Well, if you're building it for yourself, you could do what Fender used to do and just have it run outside the chassis until it gets to where it needs to go, then go through a grommet to drop in where it needs to be. Or, I've seen people do crazy things with shielding tape and all this kind of stuff. Given the length of primary wire that Fender often left floating in space in the old tweeds, if you need to just run it 6 inches across the chassis before you go back into the inner part of the chassis and put a grommet around that hole so that those wires don't get chewed up, that'd probably be the easiest way to do it, because you're going to have the chassis, which is shield, between the primaries and anything else. If I'm understanding you correctly. And I assume you mean just the outer primaries, not the center tap to the tube sockets. I think Brad's following up on that. See what Brad's typing. I'll look at that when I get to it. Yeah, 14K seems to be most of this the iPhone was putting out, which is really high for a very small speaker. Like I said, if I wanted to test all that, I'd be doing these monitors here. But also there's the frequency response of this microphone, which is probably tapering off above 12K a little bit in terms of getting that out to you guys. If I really wanted to torch you, I just connect the output of this and feed the output of this out to you and let your speaker playback systems be the only weak link. Do I know when and why AC30s lost the cathode bypass cap in the top boost circuit? Hey, CJ. Also, I found the Train Your Ears software to be useful. Okay, you do front of house. Well, good. Look up the Train Your Ears software because I have not done that. I came at it back asswards, like I said. But yeah, in '67 they removed the cathode bypass cap from the 1.5K cathode driver for the top boost circuit. I think because they were trying to get more clean headroom out of the amps because they had a notion that everyone wanted a louder, cleaner amp. And so instead of making the AC30 to be 100 watts, they just gave a little more headroom so you could turn it up more, which is odd because you actually don't have, you have to turn up to a higher o'clock position to get the same gain and volume that you had before. But there is a logic to it because if the channel stays cleaner, and you have to turn it up to a higher o'clock position to get the same amount of gain that you wanted, it also means that the bright cap on that volume pot is less effective. So you will have a amp, even if the volume is the same, it'll be a little less nails in the blackboard at those higher levels. But there are other ways to do that. I don't think it was the most useful thing for them to do, but that's what they did. And it started sometime in '67. You got a Driftwood guitar, Purple Nightmare on its way. Cool. Let us know what you think when you get it, William. Actually, you'll probably be too busy with when it does get here to pay attention to the likes of us. But let us know how you like it. Hey, Richard. 850 seems high for me, for a used cherry tone. I think those are 1100 new, so I would see if I can talk them down a bit, but maybe that's just the way the market's going now. I've got some videos up on the channel on the Cherrytone 2204, I believe, which is the same amp essentially. Look for my Cherrytone 2204 for the gotchas that I would tell you about. Though I have heard, though Nick doesn't talk to me because he doesn't like me, I have heard that Nick saw that video and was like, damn, he's right. And they've changed how they're doing the ground bus on the 2203, 2204s now. I hope that's the case. Hey, Progress Pedals. Ciao from the Salento coast of Italy. Nice. Yeah, the Paraphase is yeah, it's its own kind of black magic. It's kind of like infinite mirrors, you know, in theory, but it certainly does weird things when pushed. Let's see. Thank you, Mr. Jack. Appreciate that very much. It's very kind of you. And she's doing great. Nikki went out to do some things for her and with her today, and I'll be taking tomorrow's shift. Holy cow, I'm actually caught up. Almost caught up to where the questions are now. That's great. What master volume do I what master volume mod do I recommend for 5v3? Pre or post phase inverter? Post, because if you do it pre, you won't have any gain. The phase inverter is where the gain comes from in a 5v3. If you think about it, you've got a tube, you got a triode for each input, and that's already maxed out, and that feeds your volume pot. And the volume pot feeds what? Then put stage of the phase inverter. So if you put a master volume before your phase inverter, it's just a master volume after the two channel volumes. So it's just the third clean volume. The only way you get distortion out of a 5v3 is both the preamp tubes and the phase inverter clipping. And hopefully you can play loud enough that the output section is doing some stuff too. But if you must put a master volume in a 5v3, which I don't think is necessary, you want to do it post-phase inverter, do a LARMAR, because you'll still have the preamp and phase inverter distortion, but you will lose the output tube compression and distortion below a certain level. There is a lot to be said for, or there would, in a perfect world, the solution would be to do power scaling, variable voltage, which I have done in the past, which would lower the volume of the output of the amp while everything would still be going and distorting as if the amp were just magically on 10 but quieter. But I have gotten away from that because I've had such a high failure rate with every MOSFET that I've tried, no matter that I've paralleled them, no matter that I've heat sunk them with very elaborate, very nice high quality heat sinking. I think we're just asking too much of the devices thermally for that purpose. And I have seen other companies do it, and the same components tend to catch on fire. So I think it is a great idea that the actual MOSFETs that we use for aren't just quite up to, even though on paper they should be. In reality, they don't. Sorry to be a downer on that. What liquids do I recommend for cleaning vinyl records? Well, it's been a long time since I've cleaned a vinyl record. Back in the day, we had this thing that looked like an eraser for a blackboard at school, for those oldies out there who know what I'm talking about, that you would just have the record player on and you would just touch it to and it would clean all the grooves at once pretty much. But that was dusting. I am not the person to ask. Sorry. I'm sure someone on here is a vinyl head and can tell you what there is these days, but I have never done it myself. I can tell you the answer is not acetone. There are no perfect solutions to ground loop noise. If it's pretty minor to start, no gear I've tried gets it to the noise floor of just 1 amp. I fundamentally disagree with that. I get rid of ground loops all the time and get amps that owners regularly say, I didn't even know it was on until I played a chord and about jumped out of my chair. There are perfect solutions to ground loop noise. The best thing is to get rid of the ground loops, but you don't want to do a Band-Aid approach and try to cover up the ground loop. You want to get rid of it. Ooh, well, that sucks. I mean, I don't want you to take advantage of the guy, but see if he'll come down. Someone's got to snatch it up at the point, but they're good amps. I would not invest in one though. All right, I've got to use a little gents room. I don't have any little gents here, but they'll let me use the room anyway. I don't know why I said that. I would never say that phrase. I got to take a leak, guys. And so we're going to go to the first intermission a little bit early. So see you guys in about 7 minutes. All right. Hey, Wes, thanks for joining us. Let's see. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Next question I saw was Cameron Slager. What wattage of tube amp is appropriate to use a standby switch?
Hey, Wes, thanks for
Sorry,
joining us. Let's see.
time delay. What wattage of tube amp is appropriate to use a standby switch? It doesn't really correlate to wattage. It correlates to the type of rectifier used, solid state or tube, and the voltage rating of the filter caps, and what the unloaded B plus would be if you power the amp on immediately. So with a 100-watt Marshall, for instance, that's a solid state rectifier, and it's got 700 volts capacity on the first and second stages, so you're really not going to have any problems with the wattage capacity of the capacitors because they have the series caps. And so with one exception, you could just power a 100-watt Marshall on, but it does have a cathode follower for V2 in the 100-watt Marshall, which does not like having instant on. It likes to have the tube warmed up before any current flows to its grid. So that's really the reason that you would use a solid state in a 100 or 50-watt Marshall. I mean, use a standby with a 100-watt or 50-watt Marshall. Has nothing to do with the wattage, has to do with cathode bypass. Conversely, on, say, a twin reverb, which also has solid state rectification, it does not have any cathode follower stages, but it does have about typically 600 to 750 volts on its first stage and only 500 volts on its second stage. It's that second stage that you don't want to hit instantaneously with unloaded B plus because it can still be over 500 volts at power up. So that's where you use it there. And say super reverb, which is almost identical in most ways to the twin reverb, but it has a tube rectifier, which gives by definition a slow start. No voltage will be present in that circuit for the output tubes, etc., until the heater tube, the rectifier tube warms up. Until the rectifier tube warms up, and it takes the rectifier tube longer to warm up than it takes the L6s to warm up. So you don't really need standby in a super reverb or a deluxe reverb, but it has nothing to do with the wattages. It has to do with other factors. And for more on this, let's see, where was that so I can remove that question? Once again, valvewizard.co.uk is a great resource for questions like that, the difference between such things, when standby is necessary, when it's not. It's usually not, but sometimes it is. If your amp has standby, unless it's a Fender tube amp from 1962 to 1980 that uses a rectifier tube, or an AC30, go ahead and use a standby. That is, if it's an AC30 that has a tube rectifier, you don't need the standby. If it's solid state, use the standby. Basically, if you got a solid state rectifier, just go ahead and use the standby because only bad things can happen if you don't. If you have a tube rectifier, you don't really need standby at all. And there was one other question which I missed that Brad sort of answered. Okay, Mad Max 84. So you're having a ground loop somewhere in your rig. Usually the radio pedal will do it, but here's what we need to know, Mad Max. We need to know what your chain is. So do you have any pedals in front of or any pedals after the radial splitter? Because radial they have some that are passive, some that are active. The ones which have a ground loop lift usually have an isolation transformer, and it works. It works really well. So unless there's some other connection those amps share, like you'd have both amps using effects loops at the same time through the same gear, that can undo anything else. But say you've got an AC15 and a deluxe reverb, and you have your guitar going to the ABY pedal, and both outputs of the ABY pedal going to each amp, and you have the ground lift on your radial, you should have no ground loop in that situation. But what you do, anything else you add to that can complicate it. So if you can type up your entire rig, we'll be glad to step you through it. But we need to make sure that each amp is quiet when plugged straight in by itself, like Brad said, and that when you just do the guitar, radial pedal, the 2 amps, that should be quiet as well. It's possible that you have a faulty power cable on one of those amps too, because the radial assumes that it's lifting a redundant ground, and that each amp is going to have a safety. I had an amp not long ago where the client said, "Hey, this thing's really noisy and hummy," and I said, "Well, it wasn't here, but I did not have your IEC cable. I used one of mine. You probably have a bad IEC cables." And he had a brand new amp with a brand new bad IEC cable, had a break in the ground wire, and that was, a possibility. Let's see. Thank you, Mr. Bill. Appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Let's see. Any tips on how to draw a schematic for an amp? I have a 65 JMI MC50. It's a PA version of an AC50 Mark II, identical power section, different preamp, apparently quite rare. Well, let's see what I've got handy. I have many notebooks where I have drawn such things out. Trying to remember where one is right now. I just moved a bunch of stuff around. Why is it that I can't find anything I want to on the stream? I've got a whole bunch of clutter here right off camera. That's why I point the camera where I point it. Here's something that's going to have something in it. See what I've done. All right, here's an example of what I draw. This is, sorry, it's a pedal of some sort. I find a more representative thing of how I draw them out. See if I can find one that's where I do it in pen so you can see it. The pencil stuff is too light for you guys to make out. But that's one of the things I do, is I sit down and I figure out how they built it to begin with, so I know whether how they built it to begin with ever had a shot in hell of working. Because they don't always. Sometimes you can chase your tail trying to put everything back just the way it was, just realize everything was just the way it should never have been, and they sold it to the public. Well, here's a good example of a very simple thing. This looks to be, all right. I don't remember what amp this was, but they're basically giving us a variation on a Tweed Fender or Marshall. Wait, let me turn you off so you guys can see this. So I was just drawing what came into me. Let's see, it's here. So I drew a rough triode. I knew that it was going to have something happening with each plate and something happening with each cathode. So I went ahead and measured what those resistors were. And I saw what was happening on the grid. Okay, pretty standard stuff, 68K with a 1 meg grid leak. All right, what happens off each plate? Well, each plate's got a bypass cap as expected. And in this case, each bypass cap goes through a resistor. The treble channel, as expected, has a treble bypass cap. And then it goes to a shared volume, which also has a bright cap on it. So I drew that out. And that was, and then you just repeat that per stage. And it can get complicated when you get to things where you have if-then flowchart kind of things. But you draw each stage out by itself first. Like here's a phase inverter. And this is, just a second before I tell you wrong. Oh no, this is a, Now, this is kind of complicated. I won't share this. Not that you guys aren't smart, but it want to illustrate any useful point for this question. Like here's one where the input goes from here to here and also goes all the way to here. So this is probably a second draft because I probably would have had a pretty cluttered first try of drawing this out until I figured out what the logic was. But in terms of the bare bones of the question, any tips on how to draw a schematic, pen or pencil, and I like graph paper so I can kind of keep everything proportionate. And I just have all kinds of things like this floating around where I've drawn out certain circuits, and maybe someday I'll go through and find the ones that are interesting. We should get rid of the simple grounding arrow, too uncomplicated. Well, in my own schematics, I differentiate between chassis, and then I have multiple grounds for each section. So each section, I do universal, what do they call it, galactic ground rather than the star ground. So everything in one section will be tied to G1, then G2, G3, or G and D1, G and D2, etc. Then all those, I know that they're going to join at one point, but that's actually really complicated for a lot of schematic programs to understand. But I do differentiate between the roles of ground. Like my DC negative is not the same thing as my audio ground, is not the same thing as my shield, on the things that I actually draw properly. But that's how I do it. And I just sit down with a pen and pencil and a meter, and I figure out, it's going to have certain things in common because triode's going to triode. Okay, you got a FX loop. All right. You got a stereo delay in both amps FX loops, but you're going to have to get another radial or two because you're going to have to break those ground loops as well. I'll tell you a secret. You've really got to keep any multiple paths to ground out of the whole thing. And so if you have an effects loop and you're doing a stereo effects unit in both amps effects loops, there you go. There's the answer. Take that out of the effects loop and you should have 0 ground loop. But like we said, start simple. Pedal, get guitar straight into each amp. Is each amp quiet? Guitar into radial into each amp by themselves. That should be quiet as well. All right, guitar into pedal board, then into radial, then into the amps. That should still be quiet. Because if you have a whole complicated system and you try to figure out where the various needles are in the haystack, you're just going to end up chasing haystack all day. You cannot have a stereo device that's connected to 2 different amps unless you have more ground loop lifters. So you're going to need to get some more radial boxes for that. Sorry. Hey, Ethos, if I put a Yellow Jacket solid-state rectifier in a deluxe reverb, would the use of the standby switch then be necessary? Everyone's least favorite answer, it depends. I don't know whether the solid-state rectifier emulates any voltage drop or whether it's just a diode being sold to you in a fancy package. It depends on what the unloaded B plus would be. Now, if you look at the modern Fender 65 reissue, they've got 100 microfarad cap in series with a 47 microfarad cap, and they've got like a 470K and a 100K resistor balancing all that out, which is an odd circuit until you realize all they're trying to do is find a cheap way to have 600 volts capability in case someone put a solid-state rectifier in this amp. It would not exceed the voltage rating of the reservoir stage. Most amps that come in, I undo that, and it goes home with just a standard 47 microfarad 500 volts. So it still has a 500 volt max, but with the tube rectifier, it won't reach that. Some solid-state rectifiers emulate the drop of the rectifier tube, in which case you will not have a B plus exceeding what it would have been. Others are just diodes sold to you in large, shiny looking devices, in which case you're going to have at least 10 more volts present than you would have with a tube rectifier, in which case you could be nudging up against that 500 volt limit. So it has it's hard for me to say. I will say that a deluxe reverb probably would sound a lot better with a tube rectifier than with a solid state, but play around with it. You do have a rectifier, a standby switch. So if you're gonna see if you like the sound, and while you're testing it, see if you like the sound, use the standby. And then if you really like it, measure what the voltage is, and then you'll know whether or not it's necessary. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Would you please talk to Marshall about that? Because they're all over the goddamn map. And Mesa's the worst offender. Oh my God, Mesa. Well, I say Mesa's the worst offender. It's possible that it's H&K, but the last person I know who tried to figure out an H&K schematic is still down in the basement struggling. Those things are just tab A into slot B hell. Hey, Robbie, use a Lely P split to play 2 amps in parallel. Ground lift removes the ground loop. Good. Can I hear the difference when I press phase reverse? How can I tell if my amps are in phase? Well, in theory, if they're out of phase with each other, the resulting sound will be thinner. Now, it's not always the case because different amps have different frequency responses, and so sometimes you may not be as apparent. Other times you'll hear like, oh my God, what happened to all my low end? It's also going to depend on how physically close the 2 amps are to each other. If they're spread out, 20 feet from each other, you're just going to have this big psychoacoustic effect in the room, just this big stereo swirl. But if you move them close to each other, because of the way waveforms work, the sound waves actually work, that's when you'd hear decreased lows or loss of lower mids or some other thing. But the closer the speakers are to being the same source compared to where you're standing in the room, the more you'll hear the difference. Either that, or you can just feed them both a 80 hertz sine wave and flip the button until hey, that's louder. All right, they're in phase. There are other complicated ways to do it, but usually you can hear it. Hey, Ekimerks, he'd like to follow my recommendation to connect the heater wires of a 68 custom Princeton reverb directly from the power transformer to the tube sockets. The schematic shows me a kind of artificial center tap on the PCB. Yep. Yeah, I leave those on the PCB, and on some of the reissues, there's even a fuse in the supply. I disconnect the heater, I pull up the heater quick connects, I snip off the very end so that I have some fresh wire. I solder those wires to pins 2 and 7 of the last octal tube socket that's not a rectifier, so the last power tube. I then give it a new 100 ohm artificial center tap. I will usually do it on the octal socket from pin 2 to pin 8 and pin 7 to pin 8, because 8 is ground. On some of the reissue Fenders, though, 8 is not really ground. 8 goes to ground through a diode and a resistor, in which case I will do what I did on the last Princeton that came in. Over by the lamp on the Princeton reissue, 65 and 68, is a screw that holds down the main ground for the board. And if you lift that screw up, the ground tab's there, you can just put another ground lug there and screw them both down. That way you have a ground lug screwed to the chassis where the main ground connect to everything else is, and that you can just put the resistors from the lamp to there. You just got to remove those little plastic heat shrink things from the lamp, and then make sure that the lamp is not going to rotate. The two parts of the lamp don't rotate and touch each other. And then there's a white and black wire going from I think the second or the first from left to right, it's the second 6v6. Some black wires went from there to the board. That's where they went to the existing R1 and R2. I cut those wires; they're no longer needed, and you don't want to have the. I don't want to have the center tap resistors on the PCB because they can burn, and then if they burn, they will burn the PCB. The power transformer does not have a center tap on that amp. It is very necessary to put in artificial center tap. Yeah, I know that, man, but it is a you got to figure out how to do the net labels um, in such a way that it doesn't show a conflict. You know this, but KiCad is not always thinking about such things the same way we think about such things. Hey, Uncle Daddy 65, which I never thought I'd say. It's not a phrase that comes willingly to mind, but you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I wasn't making fun of you. I just thought that I was saying thank you, Uncle Daddy. Remember, I live in Tennessee, where such things can happen. Yeah, man. Satchmo, you've been in the game even longer than I have. Don't you love the master volume you find in a Mark I or SOB? Just a variable resistor. No voltage voltage divider concept at all. And so it's just guaranteed to sound bad and have the world's worst taper, among other woes. Yeah, Robbie, you should hear it. I mean, if you don't hear it, I don't know what to tell you. Not everyone hears everything, but it's usually pretty apparent. I don't know what happened to your post, David Allen Herrick. I have not seen your post. Post it, say it again, and I will see it. But I didn't see a previous one. I think I see all the ones that come through. Hey, middle pickup. I will check that this afternoon. I have been, if you go back and watch the beginning of the stream, I've been caught up in family responsibilities, and so I've basically been just off in space as regards the amp business the past 2 weeks. But I'm getting the real world for me is resuming, and I will get your emails, and I appreciate that. Sorry, but visual hierarchy is so important. In our culture, it's top left to bottom right. That is the flow of importance. That's not the flow in every culture, but it's important to know how things work. My wife teaches this, and I've had to not had to listen to many of her lectures, but she's practiced her lectures on me to make sure she's presenting the information well, which she does. But visual hierarchy, so much of it exists in ways that we don't think about. Hey, old guy, Stanley. Hey, Zachary Smith. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Short video on the Fender custom Vibrolux reverb some time ago. Yeah, the custom Vibrolux reverb is not a Vibrolux. It is the Vibroverb reissue with a few changed bits, including the very strange reverb driver setup in that amp. It's fine. It's got the same crappy IC brand caps as all the Fender reissues. I don't remember whether it has the same low voltage heater supply flaws as the Supersonic, which is shared with the Hot Rod and Blues DeVilles, which all derive from the 94 Evil Twin. But the custom Vibrolux reverb is a fine amp. It's prone to the same issues all the ones with the gray IC caps have. It's not ever going to be a fantastic amp. It's not really a Vibrolux reverb. It's more custom than it is Vibrolux, but there's no reason you can't sound great playing with one. But it is really a tweaked Vibro Verb rather than a Vibrolux. Hey, Michael Meehan, thank you very much. 68 Pro Reverb versus 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue. The 68 is lighter, selection, and more headroom. What do I think? Thanks. Well, they're both very good amps, and that is the only Fender amp that's currently made that's called 68 Custom anything that I will say that about. In all other instances, the Princeton, the Deluxe, the Super, the Twin, the 65 is infinitely better than the 68. But the 68 Pro Reverb, which is not actually a reissue, there was no single channel Pro Reverb 1x12 or Pro Reverb ever in 68 or any other years. That's a really nice flexible amp. It depends on whether or not you need it to be 45 watts or you can get away with 22 watts because the Deluxe Reverb is smaller and lighter and more than loud enough for most gigs. But the Pro does have a little bit more headroom, a little more clean output. Well, it's a considerable amount more clean output, but 45 watts versus 22 watts is not infinitely louder. And what was I going to say? Sorry, there was a point that I had that occurred to me that I wanted to get to. Maybe it'll come to me. You can get very similar sounds from both. The Pro is a little bit louder, a little bit cleaner. I think it has. Oh yeah, I think it has a mid-range knob. So I think you actually have controls of the mids on the Pro, and on the Deluxe it's a fixed 6.8K. The Deluxe Reverb reissue has traditionally come with really shitty sounding speakers, especially the ones with the C12K or the generic Eminence before from the earlier ones. But there are good options to make a Deluxe Reverb sound a lot better. The Pro Reverb comes with a better sounding speaker out of the gate. It's not my favorite speaker, but it's a pretty good sounding speaker. Really, you can't lose with either one, but I think the Deluxe is probably the more versatile, which may be surprising to you. Oh wait, CSR8, yeah, I forgot about the Zinky Touch. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking it wasn't as bad as it was because it's been a while since I had one. Yeah, I don't know why Zinky had to touch everything. Everything he touched turned to shit, but it sure did. 68 Pro Reverb, ton of extra mids. I don't think it has a ton. I mean, it's got a pot. You can turn it up, you get more mids. You can get more mids with it, and you get less mids with it than the Deluxe Reverb. But an awful lot of people will tell you the Deluxe Reverb has the right amount of mids. Now, I often add a mids pot on the back of a Deluxe Reverb. Yeah, I forgot about all the Zinky touches. I was thinking it was just kind of a standard reissue, but then I'm like, yeah, okay, it's got all those wires going everywhere. Sorry. Ignore any positive things I said about the custom Vibrolux reissue. Brad has jogged my memory more thoroughly. Remember, I've been out of this for about 2.5 weeks, and I just remember the nice things basically at this point. How we have those rose-tinted memories. But I thought the Pro Reverb was quite good. Myself, I'd probably buy the Deluxe Reverb because I think it's more versatile. But you can't go wrong with either. Let's see. Brad's got 3 of the custom Vibrolux reissues in the queue at the moment. All the same complaints, all due to design issues. That's right. Hey Wes, what second Fender amp would be worth having after a 66 Deluxe Reverb? Something that sounds great, but different enough that was worth having? I'm thinking something Tweed. Well, yeah. You're describing a tweed amp. As to which tweed amp you're describing, I don't know. Uh, it depends on how loud you want it to be and how, you know, there's there are a few things more fun in life to play than a 58 or 59 Bassman, but they're so earth-shatteringly loud for most home use. Whereas a 5E3 Deluxe would pair really well with your Deluxe reverb, and you can get some really nice raunchy sounds without doing as much hearing damage. But the Harvard has a lot to recommend itself too. Shoot me the email address. I'll send another 10,000. Yeah, Tweed Deluxe and Bassman are both fantastic, but they're such different things. I will say that my personal preference for the sound is the Bassman because I love that liquid low end that it gets. But if I had to buy the damn thing, given the price of the Tweed Bassman, I don't know if I'd be that tempted because it's a lot to pay for something that I couldn't turn up as often as I would like. Whereas a Tweed Deluxe is a real nice amp. Now, I've had this very nice Uncle Larry Tweed Deluxe here for the last several months. It's not been picked up by the owner yet. And I don't turn it on very often, even when I'm home to play, because I think I've heard everything it can do. I did the speaker setup test with three of them, or the two different Tweeds, the actual 58 versus, or actually actual 55 versus the Uncle Larry 5E3 with the different speaker setups. And I just kind of got it out of my system for a while because that's not, I don't know. I love that sound, but I like the AC-15 a little bit better. But I had a 58 and a 59 actual Bassman here. I love the sound of them, but I didn't play them that much because it was a volume commitment. And yeah, the 59 Bassman LTD is pretty good, but it definitely needs some help. Okay, well, you got the aux, yeah. Well, you have got my permission to get a 5F6A and be happy with it. Let's see, where was that? Yeah, but yeah, the LTD reissue is actually pretty good. I've got a not too old video up showing how I made one of those sound like a real one, and I played it right next to the 58 that I had in at the time. And if I played the 58 and the LTD both through the 58 speakers, they sounded very similar. If I played them both through the LTD speakers, they sounded very similar. But the speakers in the 58 were a lot better than the stock speakers in the LTD. And they were good. If you just want a head version of a 5F6A, Wes, you know a guy. I'm not looking to make money off you, but you'd have a hell of a thing. Yeah, and you could do it. But if you have any questions, I can step you through it. 5F6A is real easy to build. The only trick to 5F6A is just the origami of the folding chassis. The chassis space and how the doghouse works. It's not fun to work on as a physical layout. There are tricks to doing it. But if you're building a head, there's no reason to build a 5F6A in a Tweed chassis. You could get a JTM 45 chassis and build yourself a really nice 5F6A with some real estate to work in. Hey, Mike's thoughts today. I don't know any amp techs around that area. I'm sorry. Brad might know some people in very northern Florida. I'm saying that for Brad's sake, so he knows where those places are. But I don't know anyone over there. I apologize. Let's see. RS is using an AO43 output transformer in your 74 18 watt. Sounds great, but will the Mojo tone, Habor, sound any different or be close to original sound tone using 25 watt greenback? Thanks. It's going to sound very slightly different. You may or may not hear a difference. If you spend a bunch of money on a transformer to get a very small change in sound, I guarantee you will hear that sound because you know how much money you spent. I wouldn't worry about it. If you have a transformer that you like the sound of, move on to the next thing and just make a note that if you ever need to replace it, the Habor is also a good option. But the difference between 7.4K and 8K is going to be modest at most. I don't think you will know what's closer to the original because if you look at the old Drake and radio spares and stuff back in the day, the specs were all over the map. It's nominally X, but it could be a big margin. So if you like the sound of the amp, you're already where you want to be. I say that because I don't sell transformers myself. Hey, Resno, is there a way to avoid stray capacitive coupling in a 79 Silverface unspaghettied deluxe reverb? Can't get it right. Tremolo on 10 intensity thumps through the reverb on 1 into channel 1, channel 2 is fine, no ticking. Well, first of all, I'm wondering how you're getting reverb on channel 1. But you shouldn't have any reverb on channel 1. Channel 2 is the reverb channel. You don't have ticking. So you're describing thumps and you're describing ticking. And I don't understand how you're getting any reverb on channel 1. And you've already despaghettified it. You shouldn't be getting too much capacitive coupling. But I have had in the past had to separate the wires going to and from the tremolo speed and intensity pots from the reverb pot because sometimes if they're all pushed together, they will jump. The oscillation will jump into the reverb wiring. But I need some more information from you. Are you describing a thump or a tick? And are you really getting reverb on channel 1, the normal channel? Hey, Surly Montana. George made fantastic amps. The Metropolis amps were across the board fantastic. I don't know if all the voicing options that he offered would be up everyone's alley, but especially on the JT45, that's kind of a, and I mean this as it's a base good thing. That's kind of one of his more vanilla offerings and will appeal to most people. And I don't mean vanilla as a put down. I love vanilla things, but that's like a core sound as a JT45, and George did a great one. If you're into Zakk Wylde, it may not be your thing. I've heard very good things about the Oxbox, but I've not played around with one myself, Satchmo. But I've heard good things from really serious players whom I respect. Same for the Sir reactive load. And Schultz did good stuff, but Schultz is not going to be a reactive load as far as I know. So you can have some really hard behavior on an output section. There you go, Mike. Brad has access to the same list of good guys that I do. That'd be a good place to go. And Resno. Cathode of V5A at different ground. Okay, yeah, that's a good place. That's a good point. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, on that one you'd have the cathode of the tremolo going to the RCA jack, not to the cathode where everything else in that section is tied to the front panel. That's a very good point. And yes, I almost always move that cathode and resistor and bypass cap from the RCA jack back to the board. And I do the same. And I also put a 2.2K bypass with a 22 microfarad for V3 because in stock form it's an unbypassed, often 640 or 820 ohm resistor, which dies on V3. But on V5 of that period, yeah, it could be that your ground is being made to the RCA jack, which is not always the best ground. And yeah, good point. I always move that, almost always move that back to the board, going to the same place it would go on, say, a 65. Oh, come on, man. Those are not mutually exclusive thoughts. Hey, Jack Smith. Wife walked by, saw my face on screen. Hey there, Mrs. Smith. And that's why 1960s pictures of Stones, Fab Four, Wrecking Crew in studio. No headphones. Now everyone in studio has them. What gives? And what changed? Well, they definitely used headphones back in the day. Now, a little bit different for some of the very early Motown Snake Pit guys and some of the Wrecking Crew guys. A lot of the Snake Pit guys in Motown, they were listening with a. They had no. They had very rudimentary headphones, but they to hear their instrument, they had to hear the speakers. So they would have a monitor that they were hearing their bass through. James was hearing it through the monitor, and the same monitor was playing the guitar for several of the guitarists. But remember, they're playing to a live drummer. They could hear the drummer. The drummer's 10 feet over there. So they're behind a baffle. They don't have to hear the drums in their cans. It's all going down live. Now, Wrecking Crew, early Wrecking Crews, much the same way. They're in a space. You'd have a Princeton right behind the guitarist. The Princeton would be on like one and a half, really clean. But you don't have to hear everything. You have to hear the drums because you're just following Hal Blaine. And whoever the musical director is, you're watching them for cues. So the entire band's tracking live. And if you look at the Beatles tracking live, they would be tracking guitars and drums live. Maybe early days, guitars and bass and drums live, or piano and drums live. And so for those early takes, they would not have the cans on. They'd be all looking at each other doing that take, getting it down. And then on overdubs, where they have to sing to what they've already recorded or add a guitar to what they've already recorded, or later a mellotron, they put on the can so they can hear what they've already recorded. So if you see a bunch of guys in the room playing and it's an actual tracking session and they're not wearing cans, that's all going down live, and they're hearing themselves in the room. They can hear the B3 over there. They can hear the horn section over there. They can they don't have to hear the string section in the next room if that's going down live at the same time. That because they're just following the musical director conductor, or they're just following Hal Blaine, who's always a good person to follow. So that's the main reason. But the farther you get from doing it live, the more you got to have cans. Do I have any initial opinions on the Mojotone Hiwatt clones? I know that they have some that cosmetically resemble Hiwatts. I have not looked at any of them. I don't know whether they're good or not. I imagine they're pretty good. I don't think they're going to slap their name on something that's just outright bad. But I don't, Hiwatt is an ambitious build. I'd have to see what their kit looks like. I don't actually spend much time looking at kits. Sorry. Hey, Sash. I've looked at Mesa Mark I and Mark II schematics over the years and somehow failed how to understand how they get their gain, given its a Fender Blackface platform. And those are mid-scooped clean. Let me see if I can call that up for you. A second. Let's see if I can find a Mesa Mark I schematic for you. And we'll show you that. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Let's see if I can get this large enough. All right, just a second, guys. All right, here we go. All right, so input 1 and input 2 up at the upper right, just because Mesa says fuck you to visual hierarchy and convention. So each input goes through a triode, much like you'd find on a Tweed basement. Actually, it's a little bit more like you'd find in a JCM 800. So input 1 goes to this one, which also goes to input 2. It's very complicated the way they do this. So the one, this input 1 has this gain stage, which then goes through this gain stage, whereas input 2 only goes to this gain stage. So input 2 is the gain stage of a Fender, which is mid-scooped, as you see here. But input 1 has an additional gain stage. Now this is pretty much full frequency gain stage compared to like a JCM 800 because there's no scooping of the lows here. And there's no bright cap or anything, so they're not changing the coloration here at all. They're just kind of go through here and just get a lot of gain. So your output of going into input 2 is just the output level of guitar. But when you go into input 1, that guitar gets amplified 100 plus times and then goes. So that's a lot of gain right there on input 1. Then it goes to a standard Fender tone stack with a gain boost, which just lifts the mid-range from ground. That's pretty standard stuff these days. And it's got a 110 picofarad bright cap, which is essentially the same as the Fender. And then it goes here to another gain stage. This is much like you have in the Fender. In the Fender, this one feeds the reverb. This one also feeds the reverb. So the reverb goes this way. It's going to have less lows on the reverb send than and a lower impedance, a little less efficiency than on Fender. But other than that, much the same. Unbypassed there, so that resistor is going to want to burn. And then it's going to go through the reverb tank. That's all looking very Fendery there. That's shared with X, so that's just a straight copy from a Princeton right there, that recovery stage. 820, 22, and it's shared with X, so you make sure that 22 is in good shape. So this is pretty much very simple. It has 2.2 meg versus 3.3 megs, so it's a little less reverb in the mix than on a Fender. And then it goes to master volume. Now this master volume is actually working as a variable, as a voltage divider. Some of the right after the Mark I, they went to the SOBs and stuff, and that was just wired as a variable resistor, which is not a very good way to do it. And then it goes out to the rest of the circuit, which is really unimportant as far as gain goes, other than you can abuse that if you run out to the graphic EQ and max the graphic EQ. But most of the gain you're talking about is right here, where there's just this one additional gain stage, and it's got a okay, they're using some LEDs, not LEDs, some kind of diode instead of a resistor, which is fine. It just gives you a fixed voltage, so it's a kind of a slapdash fixed bias versus a true cathode bias. But other than that, I'm not seeing anything major here other than just has a lot more gain. You know how much more a Fender can overdrive. Just a second, let me take off the screen sharing. If you already know how much more a Fender can overdrive if you go to Les Paul from a Strat, well, that's just a small order of magnitude comparing sending a full unattenuated triode output into the next stage like that. There's no attenuation there, except what attenuation is added by that gain pot. So that's how they do that, and it's not really. That's got a 10K mids pot, so it can be scooped. It doesn't have to be scooped. And if you if you do the boost and lift the mids entirely on the Mesa, there won't be any scoop. Hopefully that helps. Thump of trem in channel 1 with the reverb on 1. You shouldn't have any tremolo in channel 1. Uh, Play around with that ground location for V5 like we talked about, just in case that's what's going on. That's an odd thing. Is it possible to have a rattle in a pair of 6L6s? Yes. Sometimes they rattle. See, and they're Alan's, or I'm saying Diego so you know who I'm talking about. His name's Alan. Alan from Berlin, famously. Yeah, he just answered much more succinctly than I did. Basement amps were designed primarily for basses because no one had ever made an amp that loud before, and the instrument that needed the volume the most for dance styles of the time was the bass. It takes a lot more wattage to make a bass frequency loud than it does to make a shorter wavelength like a 500 hertz, a 800K, 2K, whatever. Not 800K, 800 hertz. And so to make the bass be as loud as the guitar, you would need to have a much louder amp. So you have a 45 watt bass amp to match up to the 18 watt guitar amp, and everyone's the same volume. And then guitarists realized they could plug into it and then turn it way up and do things that Leo never intended. And here we all are. All right. And it's only with chassis closed. Yeah, that really points to that ground. If it doesn't happen unless the chassis is closed up, that's really strange. Fix all that and then get back with us at Resno. Hey, Bert Rodriguez. Thank you very much. Any suggestions on bringing down B plus on a deluxe reverb? I've fixed several now. The B plus usually 450 to 460. Sounds better with a Variac around 115. Zener. Well, Zeners are a hard one to pull off because Zeners introduce so much heat. The main thing I would say is first try a 5U4GB instead of the GZ34 or 5AR4 because you'll give you 30 more volts off the B plus without drawing excess. The power transformer in a deluxe reverb can handle a 5U4GB just fine. It won't stress the power transformer. They don't cost much more. In fact, you can get new old stock ones in good condition for much less than you can get any new old stock GZ34s. And it's very easy to do because you don't have to modify anything. You certainly don't have to drill for a big heat sinked Zener. And Zener is just going to generate way more heat. So try a 5U4GB first. Thank you, Bobby Boy. Got a Larmar in my AB763 and Marshall 87 builds, individual bias pots for each tube. After a few months, the master's started letting through volume even at 0. What is the culprit? Thanks. Well, first of all, I'm not a big fan of individual bias pots for each tube. I've played around with that. It just overcomplicates things and is rarely necessary. But I can't imagine a functional master letting through volume even at 0. You may have a pot where one side's just going out of whack, and so you're not getting. See, the Larmar is unlike a crossline. A crossline works by phase cancellation. They blend the two together. The two sides are out of phase with each other, so they blend together to nothing. Larmar, it's just turning down the volume on each side, so the output level goes to either ground in the case of a cathode biased amp, or in the case of your AB763 and your 87, to bias. That should be to the bias. Now, it's possible that your bias cap is failing, but it's unlikely that it's failing on both amps. I would have to have your amp in front of me to tell you for sure, but it's very odd. It's a very odd symptom because it's literally a volume pot. As long as there is a ground or bias reference, it should function. trying to think if there's any condition, any failure mode that would be common to both those apps. Well, the only thing I can think of, though you'd have a big issue, um, well, no, you wouldn't have that happen because you'd have if there's something in the Larmar to bias pot per tube were to go south, one or more tubes would red plate. I think you might need to take your amp to a tech. Probably easy for me to see, but it's hard for me to visualize if you know what I mean. It should just voltage dividers work. They have to have a certain condition, but the condition for that voltage divider to work in a Larmar would be the case of oh wait, I was about to say it would be the condition for, you'd have to have the bias working for the output tube to work, period, and that's the same condition present for the Larmar, unless you did the complicated thing, which is also sometimes called a Larmar, which I hate that we have different names for things. There are two ways to do it. The way I do it is you just replace the 220K grid leaks in the existing circuit with the halves of the 250K pot. Other people do it this way. They take the output of the existing coupling caps and they feed that to a dual 250K pot tied reference to ground, and then those outputs then have additional coupling caps, which then go to the existing grid leak resistors and the bias setup. So if that's what you've done, if you have 4 coupling caps rather than 2, you could have a ground reference being gone for your Larmar, the master volume, in which case the master volume will barely change the sound at all, but you would still have the bias present. So your output section would work. So that's probably what's going on. You've probably lost your ground to your volume pots if you're using the 4 output cap method. Because that'd be referenced to that lugs 1 and 4 of the master volume pot would be referenced to ground rather than to bias if you're using 4 coupling caps. I hope that made any kind of sense. It doesn't. It's hard to talk about this stuff sometimes. I find myself dancing about architecture. See you, Greg. All right, we're at the top of the second hour. We're going to take another 7-minute intermission. And Wes, did you bring enough Aperol spritz to share with the class? All right, see you guys in 7 minutes. See. There was one I wanted to reply to before I get to where the questions are now. Where was it? Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. It's always fun trying to find, seeing something and then trying to find where it actually is. I don't see it now, but I will talk about it anyway. One of you, kind souls, said you've been using the Zener plus MOSFET trick from RG Keen to drop B plus. That is the same issue potentially as with the full variable voltage, and that's the core of the variable voltage concept. And it has the same caveat: is that while yours may be working, and I hope it always does, I hope I'm giving you a needless warning, as something that I do professionally, that I have to have work for my clients every time. I've had too many heat failures from MOSFETs. I no longer will do that. You can do it yourself. And, if 7 out of 10 never have a problem and you're one of those 7, you're great. But from someone who does it professionally, if I have a 30% failure rate, that's 30% of the repairs and bills I get, send out that make me look bad. So I don't like that. And I've just had too many failures with MOSFETs not surviving in that attenuation circuit, whether it's variable or not. But it does save a lot of the heat that you get with the just straight Zener drop. But let's see. Now that I've addressed that. Hello, I cannot pronounce your name. I assume you're in Greece, in which case your entire life is the Odyssey and IMAX. We're all very jealous. Any thoughts about the Vox AC15H1 TV anniversary? It has an EF86 in the normal channel. Any serious issues with it? Thanks. Yeah, it has very serious issues. I would avoid that and the entire 30 and 15 Heritage series, which is a shame. On paper, it's a great amp, but it has a fake turret board, by which I mean that it has turrets and it has a board, but the board is a circuit board, and the turrets are not really mechanically attached to the board. They're soldered to solder pads on the PCB. And the two things that it doesn't like are heat and vibration. The two things that an amplifier experiences are heat and vibration. And so it's very common for the turrets to break off and damage the traces and the pads on the fairly cheap PCB beneath them. So given that, and the fact that the entire amp is overcomplicated with this suspension mount chassis, which just results in a lot of bad wires floating everywhere, and those wires are prone to breaking where they're soldered because the wire was too thin. I don't think that those amps were ready for prime time, and they should not have been sold. It's a shame. On paper, it's great. Hey, a Vox that has a EF86 and all that has some other issues where they get the circuit wrong. But the main thing is the boards don't last. They're not reliable, and repairs can quickly get very expensive. Hey, Ekemerks. My basement 70 has an intermittent blowing fuse. It runs without any problems for hours and weeks. Suddenly again, a blown fuse. Filter caps, rectifier diodes, and tubes are replaced. Any suggestions? Are you using standby? If you're using standby, a standby switch is rated for hundreds of volts of AC, but almost no volts, like 30 volts DC, and yet it has in normal use, 300 to 400 volts plus up to 500 volts DC on it. And at the moment of switching, it can have a lot more than that. Now, granted, there's not a lot of current present, so it handles it usually. But at the moment of switching, not only do you get a voltage spike, you get a current spike. And that may be what's taking out your fuse intermittently. And so the trick is just to replace the standby switch. It's actually arcing. Maybe if you were to have the amp out and power it on in a fully dark room, you might even see a little flash of light at that switch at the moment you do that. That's the most likely cause. Or you could have something going seriously wrong in one of your power tubes, but you replace them. So I would look at either a intermittent solder joint where sometimes it makes connections and sometimes it doesn't, and when it breaks and makes the connection again, you get arcing, or the standby switch. Those are things that I can say should be looked at from here. I cannot tell you exactly what. If I had the amp, I would find it. But in theory, those are things I would look for first. Oh, also any resistors which are going left to right when you look down, because the way those boards flex, they flex like this, and any resistor that's going this way can get pulled out as the board flexes, whereas any resistor going this way will just flex with the board. That makes sense? That's very common, and sometimes it'll look fine, but if you go through and tug on each resistor, you'll see a resistor just comes out of a little hole in the solder that exactly fits that resistor lead. And as the amp gets hot, it can make and break connections, and then you get arcing, which every time you have arcing, you're going to have a surge of current, and the fuse will do what it wants to do, what it was designed to do, what you want it to do. I've only tried the Jensen mods in very small amps with like 8-inch speakers, and they're fine. I've not tried any of the larger ones. Hey, Daria, sorry. I feel like with my ProRev reissue, Reverb 2 sounds warmer. Input 2 sounds warmer or smoother than Input 1. Is that an actual frequency response difference? Or are we simply hearing the Fletcher-Munson curve at work? All right, I did a video on this very subject with Keith at 5 Watt World on his channel a month or so ago. So if you go to Brad, can you find that video and pop that in the links for Duria? Sorry, I keep getting that one wrong. It's been a few weeks since we talked about that. But yeah, I covered that in length, and I had graphics and charts, and because that's something that people just don't understand how it works, and it's on Fenders, it's on Voxes, it's on most Marshalls, not the 800s. We get into that, but I answered that for about 20 minutes in that video. So I'm sure Brad is finding that link for you. And Keith's got a lot of good stuff on his channel. So while you're there, look around. If you don't know 5 Watt World, it's a friendly place. You are not hearing just Fletcher-Munson, and it is an actual frequency response difference, but there's a video there for you that'll get into the weeds. Yeah, the CSR8 is evil, and I don't know if I've had a similar but not an evil version. It's confusing. Fender I don't know why Fender doesn't just reissue the actual Vibrolux as made in '65, because that's one of the best amps they've ever made. Not only Daria, not only did I do all that, but I did it live. So. Though, if you watch it, Keith had my volume up a lot more than his, and with my signal going off from my live stream and how he set me, I sound a little shouty and distorted on that video. But just turn the volume down a little bit. I'll sound great. You won't hear what Keith has to say, but he's unimportant anyway. Keith would get a giggle if you heard that. He's often here. He may be here just lurking. You lurker. Let's see. There's the thing I was talking about. It was Ted Mitch. All right, with the Zener MOSFET. Yeah. Sorry, Ted. I knew I'd seen it when I was outside during the last intermission, but I forgot where it was in the stream. And Arno says the new one. I didn't know there was a newer one. Looks close to this. It should look close to the 65 Princeton ratio because you could build either amp with the same board. And that's the main thing that people forget is that the parts to make a twin reverb are the same parts to make a deluxe reverb. The board is literally the same. The components and where they go are literally the same. It's just the transformers and number of tubes and the mid spot and then the bright switch. But the same board goes into both amps. And certainly for the Vibrolux, the Vibrolux is a deluxe reverb with 6L6s, which is a wonderful thing. Yeah, I try to explain to people about master volumes that any master volume, any attenuator, doesn't matter what it does, doesn't matter how expensive or fancy it was, is to be used within a certain range of effectiveness. Now, if you really need to practice for bedroom levels, it'll do that. It won't sound fantastic at true bedroom levels, but you can practice that way. But it's not designed to make a 100-watt amp sound like a 2-watt amp. It's designed to make sure that you can play your 40-watt amp on a smaller stage and not lose the gig. That you can play your 100-watt amp on a moderately sized stage without having to be at full tilt. So, I tell people, expect to get usable results down to about 10 o'clock on the master volume. Below that, you're going to have compromises. But if the compromise is like, hey, it's not the best sound in the world, but I didn't get evicted this month, that's a good compromise. But if it's like, hey, if I keep it at 11 o'clock, the amp still sounds really good, but I'm a little louder than maybe I'd like, well, maybe you need less efficient speakers or you need a smaller amp. You cannot. A 100-watt amp with a master volume is not a direct substitute for also having a 15-watt amp. And then he goes to say what I was saying, but much more succinctly, of course. Yeah, you can get into 5R4s and other tubes that'll drop even more than 5U4GB. It depends on how much of a drop you need. Let's see. I don't care for Negronis. My wife does. Some modern apps use post-phase inverters. Some modern apps use pre-phase inverters. If I ever get a Rev in, I'll tell you what it uses. I don't know what they're using those. Yeah, and for those who don't know, Brad's been doing his dry Julys for the past 3 or 4 years. It's a good fundraising cause. Donate if you can. I have not this year because all my money has gone to paying the bills while not getting a whole bunch of work in because I've been dealing with so much family stuff. That's not a poor me thing. It's just a reality. I've not been able to get as much work done this month as I normally do. I will be playing furious catch up. 6th year. So this is the first year that I have not been able to make a pretty good donation. So I feel bad about that. So please, everyone, go give Brad's donations to Brad's cause. It's a very good one. And he's a nice guy, despite what I say about him. So there. Yeah, David Allen. That's what I was suggesting. If you got the 4-cap version and you don't have a ground reference, then your master volume won't work. But it's odd that it happened to two amps with the same setup, unless you just, I don't know the quality of the solder work involved. It's possible you just have bad joints or bad connections somewhere. I don't know. I'm sorry. Hey, Dustin. Ooh, fixing some preamps. All right. All right, so you're getting bleed through when your gain is max, but the volume's on zero. That's different than saying, I thought you meant that the master volumes weren't doing anything. That you turn them down, nothing was happening. Could just be a lead dress where something is radiating itself enough that the grids of the power tubes are still picking it up. I also don't know how your Lawnmower is wired. Some people wire it so the grid goes to ground when turned down. Some people do it the other way. But if you're looking for total silence with the gain maxed on the amp, you may not get that just because there can be channel bleed and just intermodulation bleed and stuff in the amp itself. But usually it's dead silent. But I'd have to look at how it was wired. And don't forget, in a year, 2 years, in 2 years, Brad will be doing a live stream. That means we have 2 years to remind him that he's committed to doing that live stream. We have 2 years to remind him what time that live stream is supposed to start, Brad. Hey, Taylor Nut, my 79 Princeton Reverb has the push-pull volume pot. I thought the volume knob was loose, but it turns out the shaft on the volume pot wiggles left to right. Normal or needs replacing? It's not normal, but it's not uncommon in those. Those are really awful pots. I just removed one from a 76 Super Reverb. Or was it a twin? I think it was Super Reverb. Anyway, because it was no longer working well as a pot, but it's a pretty poor quality switched pot. If it doesn't cut out, if the sound isn't cutting out, it just kind of feels wiggly, you're fine. It's not really an easy pot to repair due to the way it was built, but it's not how it's supposed to be, but it's how they often are at this point. It was not a good quality pot, and now time has passed. Let's see, trying to get to the next question. Hey, Vinny. Sorry about the hangover. I'm going to let everyone else give you suggestions for Vox and Orange type amp Sash. Yeah, I was watching Satchmo during the last solar eclipse. I was watching the shadows of leaves because the entire world was doing weird fractal patterns in the shadows. It was much cooler than staring up at nothing. Really? Because I've measured drops from GZ34 to 5U4GB, and they're usually 20 to 30 volts, which is spec. But I don't know what to tell you. Unless it's a Sovtech 5Y3, usually it does what it says on the 10 within a tolerance range. Uh, I don't remember which anniversary I've worked on. I've had two of the anniversaries in. It's the one where the Top Boost channel had reverb added. And if your TBX sounded like that, it was an unusually bad sounding TBX. But it's possible they had yet another anniversary model that I've not had in yet. But the one that I have had was not good. And the TBX is a noisy hunk of shit until you fix it, and then the fix costs a ton. I don't understand why people love the TBX. It's such a noisy, poorly built hunk of junk. Yeah, it was made in England. Have you seen a 70s English car? Same design. Only the doors do close on the Vox. I'll give them that. Let's see. Hey, George, my vintage PB solid state amp sounds good, but sometimes the volume fades noticeably after about 20 minutes. What might cause that? I would imagine it would not hurt you to have all the electrolytic capacitors replaced. Electrolytic capacitors are designed to last 15 to 20 years tops. Sometimes they last longer. When they fail, they don't always fail in a big puff of smoke. they they fade, and sometimes they get intermittent, and that may be what you're experiencing. If nothing else, a tech who does that would find any other issues. But I don't know which model it is. I don't know what vintage it is. So, just in a nutshell, old amplifiers need old caps changed out. Board Chords is ready to do that, recreate that scene from Back to the Future. Let's see. Oh man, Wes, I'm sorry to hear you're in between gigs again. I've been debating whether to go see the Odyssey at all, and if so, to see it in IMAX. My debate has been tabled because there's only one IMAX in Memphis, and every showing through next Thursday is already sold out, except for the awful seats, and they don't show past next Thursday. So I love the concept, and I'm the absolute perfect target audience for a movie based on Greek mythology. And I like the cast. And anyone who's got a problem with Lapita can suck my left nut. But I have problems with using the Viking boat and the bat armor helmets. Visually, there seem to be some very strange choices that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to overlook. But I want to see the damn thing in its best possible light. So it was shot in IMAX. I'll see it in IMAX. I missed Oppenheimer in IMAX, which I regret. But I don't go to the movies very often since COVID. I kind of lost my taste for spending $70 to see a movie when I can see it 2 weeks later. It seems like on streaming service. And I especially don't like it when people talk and they're on their phone in the theater. It's like every sense of public decorum has left, and that makes me sound really old. And I don't care. And which puts me in a bad spot too when it happens, because Nikki loathes any form of confrontation, and I kind of live for that shit. So I'll get up and say, "Get the fuck out! I paid $60 to be here. I don't want to see your phone." And then Nikki feels like dying, but sometimes it feels right to be right. That's its own reward. And I'm still young enough that when I yell at those clouds get a little bit scared. Well, we love when you start a live stream, a 6 a.m. live stream at 6 a.m. It's just when you start a 6 a.m. live stream at 7 something. Yeah, you know, we're there for you, buddy. We wait and wait. let's see. Oof. SVTs on the walls. Yikes. Hey, TKs. Got AC30C2 to something. Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. You mentioned a branch in the power supply. It's really easy. So, as you know, on a Fender or a Marshall, they use what I call a ladder filter scheme. So you have the reservoir cap and its ground, and then it goes through the choke, goes to the screen cap and its ground, and then it has a dropping resistor which goes to the phase inverter node and its ground, then a dropping resistor which goes to this preamp node and its ground, and then another dropping resistor and the other preamp node and its ground, and that continues on. So you have node ground connections, either inductors or resistors between them. That's what I call the ladder ground scheme and power supply scheme. Vox on the AC15 and AC30 did not do that. They have the reservoir node, its ground, the choke, the screen node, and its ground. And then from the screen node, it goes from a 22K resistor to the phase inverter node, which has its ground. And from the screen node, it goes from a 22K resistor to the preamp node and its ground. And then from the screen node, there's a 10K resistor to the top boost node. So the preamp node, the top boost node, and the phase inverter node each have one filter cap to themselves, and that filter cap is derived from the screen node, not from each other. And so you just cut one trace on the back of the board, so you're separating the preamp and the top boost nodes, and then you can run the top boost node, connect the top boost node, the preamp node, and the phase inverter node all to the screen node, and keeping the dropping resistors where they need to be. And that greatly reduces the overall filtering and changes the overdrive behavior of the AC15 and 30C series. So there you go. And I'll give that information out buried this far in a live stream, where if anyone is watching me this long, they deserve to have any pearls of wisdom I might have picked up along the way. I can't really say that it's, I don't count on me for pearls of wisdom, but I pick up on things as I go. But if I put that out in a video, then people are just going to steal it. And there's B, there's going to be a whole lot of carved up PCBs, so people don't have any business doing these changes or even understanding what I'm saying. Hey, Mike's thoughts today. Yeah, I got some real good shots in Arizona. Maybe at the end of the third hour, if anyone wants to stick around, I'll come back and show you some Arizona photos. But that is optional. But I feel like I owe you guys the full 3 hours of amp stuff first. So that's the reason most people are here. But after 3 hours of amp stuff, I'll talk about anything I want. If I want to talk about pictures and anyone wants to see them, I will do that. Best way to record amp audio for under $300. All recordings I've made sound terrible, not representative of what it actually sounds like. I know nothing about recording. All right, SymBot, it's really tricky because there's so many factors and the solution can get very expensive. What are you using them for? Because there is a reason people have loved HX Stomps and how was it called? Tonex devices and all, because it's a shortcut. You will never sound as good as, say, Back in Black with that stuff, but it sounds a lot better than what a lot of amateur mistakes sound like. In order to record a good sound, if I had some said you have to have good sound for your YouTube channel and you only have $300, I would do exactly what I did to start. I would get a used SM57 for $75. I would get a mic stand, and you probably pick one up at a Goodwill for like $20 if you shop around. You're going to need a good quality mic cable. That's going to be another $20 to $30. You're going to need to have, assuming you don't have one, an audio interface. Pick up a used Motu M2 or used Scarlett 212i, probably $50 to $100. And so you're probably right about $300 right there. And then time. Doing it again and again, trying moving the mic, trying this setup, try this setup. until you get what you need. Now, it doesn't have to be a 57. There are other mics that will work, but everyone I know who gets consistently great guitar recordings can do that with a 57. But then the main thing is to really learn what you're doing and why everything is done. I mean, let me grab a 57 real quick. All right, say this is the SM57, and this is the speaker. This sounds very different than this. This sounds very different than this. This sounds entirely different from this. And so all these things, there's so many variables just with the angle of the mic and the distance between the mic and the amp. All right, you would plug it into an audio interface, and I would suggest finding a used Focusrite Scarlett or used Moto M2. It's going to have a mic pre-built into it. You can get a mono one, but go ahead and find a used one with two, because otherwise the mono one will only work until you need to record two things at once. That's what takes the signal from the microphone, makes it loud enough to be recorded, and sends it into your computer to be recorded. And then if you have a Mac, you can use Mac, you can use GarageBand, which is a free DAW. There's Reaper and others available for free or for very little. Ableton's got a very inexpensive version, I think, for PC. But the main thing, you can buy the boxes, you can buy the gear. The main thing is to say, I'm going to see what this sounds like, and then I'm going to see what this sounds like. And then I'm going to see what this sounds like. And I'm going to see what this sounds like, and this sounds like, and this sounds like, and this sounds like. And then pretend this is the speaker. I want to do this side. Pretend this is the speaker. What does this sound like? 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 Okay, I like this. Now, do I like this better, or do I like this better? Or do I like this better? All right, I like this better. Now, do I like this better, or this better, or this better, or this better? All that stuff. This being moved matters more than this versus some other microphone. Matters more than this versus a Motu versus a Scarlett Pre. It's always going to come down to the mic placement. And there's not a right or wrong, but you will quickly find the things that work for you, depending on your environment. But the time spent experimenting is a lot better spent than money spent trying to buy really great gear out of the gate. Thank you, Wes, for helping him, and Brad as well. Yeah, the 57 is not the best mic to use, but it is one of the best mics to learn with, and it's one of the most common mics out there, and one of the ones you're most likely to find used in good shape for a very low price. Most of the audio you've been hearing on my channel the last year and a half, when you hear guitar, has been a almost $700 ribbon mic, which is not something you need to start with. But it is wonderful. It's fantastic. But I've did many years with this, and I could do this again, and people would say, that still sounds good. And you can do Groucho routines with it. By the way, Simbot, I'm toying around with the idea of doing a second channel, and that second channel will be for my photography interest, my video interest, and audio recording, because all those things go into this channel about the amps, and I love talking about these things, but I haven't felt right doing a bunch of videos about the tangential things on the amp channel. But when I do the second channel, I'm going to be doing videos on, hey, let's play a game. You've got $300 and you want to learn how to record guitar, acoustic and electric. What can you do? Let's do that. Because these are the videos I wish that or the information in general, that I really wish that I had when I was starting out. Would I recommend a negative feedback mod on the 5E3? I don't find it really that useful, Greg. You know, I've done it. I've done all kinds of things. And, you know, this point-to-point amps, Uncle Larry's got one, and I demonstrated it, which, you know, it works. But, all right, here's my thought. Turn down a little bit. There's negative feedback. Turn down a little bit more. There's even more negative feedback. Turn it all the way up. No negative feedback. You know, Telecaster straight into a 5E3 can do an awful lot more. There are a lot of YouTube videos about how to mic a guitar amp, but a lot of them aren't very good. Same reason on, I've watched way too many videos on doing lighting setups for YouTube videos. A lot of bad advice out there. How to edit for YouTube videos. A lot of bad advice out there. You know, how to do sound. According to most YouTube videos, I should be doing this all the time. So yeah, I'm here trying to influence you now. Do you feel influenced? Or they tell you that instead of this, I should have a shotgun mic. And I see you there, Alan, with your 50s car and 50s English car and 60s English car. I hear you. I know what I mean. But the 70s, man, the 70s were something else. Yeah, the anniversary AC30s are sad. Well, here's the thing. I know it's limited run, but I get sent limited edition esoteric amps all the time from various companies, various areas. I know I've had that amp in, I'm pretty sure, and I was not impressed. Sometimes rarity is just for a reason. And I don't mean to sound snobbish, but I've had some, and I continue to have routinely really nice amps come in, the kind of stuff that gets featured normally in like Vintage Guitar Magazine and all. And sometimes they're not that great, and sometimes they are, and that's when I like when the really good stuff, you know, the really good stuff lives up to the rep. I guess you're out, Martin. Thank you very much. I know if you are out, I'm replying to this probably 15 minutes before, but 15 minutes after you left. But I always look forward to seeing you here, Martin. Oh, Brad, did you already answer this? I guess Brad missed it. Standby is used after power. Standby is used for powering the amp on. Is not used for powering the amp off. So you have the standby switch down and the power switch down. You power the amp on. Wait 2 minutes. Flip the standby up. Play. When it comes time to turn the amp off, just power it off. Just flip it off. And a few minutes later, if you turn the standby down, you know, flip the standby switch down, so the next time you power it on, it's already off. That's all there is to it. Ooh, Transformer blew again. Your TSL JCM 2000 wrecked your output tubes. Ah, total loss. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, in addition to the other issues JCN 2000s have, the Transformers using that era of Marshalls, not just in the 2000s, but in the ACM 800s and 900s, the Vox AC30 from the era. The Transformers are shit. Sorry. Trying to get to the next question. Yeah, I've not seen whether Memphis has got the 70 millimeters or not. Uh, I don't care about the highest picture quality for a movie, but the aspect ratio. So even if it's not, even if it's a lesser IMAX, but still has the desired aspect ratio, I'll at least see the compositions that they wanted. I'm really hoping that when the damn thing comes out on streaming, you choose to watch it in the original aspect ratio or the standard 16:9. I'd rather watch it in the original, just have it letterboxed as necessary. But we shall see. Let's see. Trying to get through to everyone's questions. Ah, Brad, you got an AKG dealership. Nice. But the Blue Snowball is not a guitar amp friendly mic. I've not played around with too many USB mics yet, but I imagine the Blue Snowball is that's just pure marketing. It's fine for doing a very unpro level voiceover, but I'm not sure what a movie about ancient Greece being displayed or not displayed properly in the southern hemisphere says about American history, unless you're one of those crazy people who treats all of this western hemisphere as America. I guess South American history or American history in the greater sense, but let's see. Ah, okay. That's a bit better. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of things about American history that are fucked up, but I don't think we directly impacted the availability of IMAX in Ecuador or even Sydney. I just don't sleep anymore, man. I think you can relate to that. Now, Steve Albini is, if he's got videos on how to mic speakers, pay attention to them. But there's a lot of bad recording advice out there. And watch a bunch of them because you may think my advice is in the bad list. The Jupiters are made to their spec by Warehouse, and they're very similar to the G12C that I love so much from Warehouse. All the Jupiter speakers are great. They're just like, French vanilla versus home style vanilla. They're variations of themselves. They're very good. Trying to reach the end before we take one more break and then do photo time. Let's see. Sorry for the dead silence here. I'm just trying to read down to find any other questions. Here we go. Hey, Greg Meyer. My Princeton rattles. Not sure if it's a chassis or tube. It's on a stand that has it leaning back about 30 degrees. Could it be causing the rattle? Well, you could have a rattly stand. You could have a loose foot on the cabinet. You could have a microphonic tube. You could have screws which aren't tight holding the chassis to the cabinet. You could have screws that aren't tight holding a baffle in place. A baffle could be vibrating. You could have a loose speaker screw. You could have loose screws on the cleats holding the baffle to the cabinet. There are a lot of things, and the angle may exaggerate or exacerbate it, but you just gotta have to find it. Sorry, we've all been there, man. Is it does it do it through the speaker, or are you just hearing it acoustically in the room? Hey, Wes. Main issues. First of all, the paint flakes like hell. Um, if you lose any original knobs, it's hard to find matching ones, and they need to have all the electrolytics changed out. Other than that, they're pretty rock solid, and Brad's got you covered. Main thing though is just they tend to look like ass because they were abused because they were so reliable. All right, so you're hearing it acoustically in the room, not through the speaker. All right, so make sure all the hardware is tight. That includes output jacks. Um, See if you can just lightly touch each tube with your finger and see if it dampens it. Don't press the chassis up. Don't put a bunch of just the weight of your finger against each tube. See if you can isolate where it is. And good luck. Sorry. All right, I'm going to take one more 7-minute intermission, and then we'll go into photo mode for those of you who care. So for those of you who don't care, thank you for being here for the first 3 hours. I appreciate you coming. Appreciate your interest. More videos to come soon. A whole bunch of work coming. Some really cool stuff in the works. And if you're not into photography, I don't blame you for signing off now. For those of you who are interested in seeing the Sonora Desert as captured by me, stick around. I'll see you in a few. All right, coming back a little bit, real fast. We'll get to what Resno said. Lifted the V5A cathode cap and resistor to filter cap grounds. Moved intensity wires from reverb pot. Works way better, even closed. Still tiny trim bleed and scratchy. No DC on the channel 1 pot. Reverb on 1. Well, get some F5 fader lube or similar to clean the volume pot. And maybe the reverb pot as well. I would suggest at this point take the knobs off all the pots, remove the nuts holding the pots in place, pull the pots out from the chassis, clean the surfaces of the pots and the chassis where they make contact, and put everything back together, make sure everything's tight, and see if that helps, because the shielding function of the pot bodies can be affected negatively by the grounds not being perfect connections. So let me get some things moved around here so I can see the chat in real time, and I'll go to the photos. Ouch, don't cut off your finger. Oh my God. I can relate. It's not fun. Don't do that. I don't know if, yeah, a chunk of missing finger here. Don't do that, or you'll play like me. All right, let's see here. Let me move over and change over to the photos. All right. And let me show you just one photo at a time. So we got up at 3 the day we're leaving for Arizona. We got to the airport about 4:20 and got through security, got to the gate, and found out that our flight had been delayed initially an hour. Turned out we were delayed almost 3 hours and being diverted to Nashville instead of Houston because there was a storm through Houston. But anyway, once I found out that our flight was delayed, I went back outside to take some pictures. So I got the old 60s canopy here at the Memphis airport. It's at still not quite sunrise, but the sun was low on the horizon. I thought that was nice. And caught some pictures, just sat outside, tried to get people arriving. And this guy's apparently going to New York City, and I liked being able to get this shot. I really like the flexibility the camera offers, is that XE5. And every photo you will see in this will either be the Voigtlander 27mm or a few with the Voigtlander 18mm. Most of them are the 27, so equivalent to 40, all manual focus. And I've got a roll of XX and a roll of Portra 160 that have gotten back from the lab yet. So those are done on a 50, also manual focus. So this is a manual focus only trip. And they're doing some construction there on some of the infrastructure in front of the airport. And the sun was hitting these guys just right, so I took a few shots. And I was pretty far away. This is using the digital zoom feature that the camera has. And I was really pleased with these. They reminded me of National Geographic shots or something. I could tone down the highlights there, but that's what it looked like. It was really bright where it was bright, so that's what I got. And this is my Bill Eggleston, my airport Eggleston, and I love the richness of the colors and how saturated everything is without looking cartoonish. I got this woman getting ready to go in, and she had her carry-on there, who was excited, and I got the backlit hair flip. I wish her friend wasn't in the shot. I wish the car wasn't in the shot, but what can you do? And then another angle of them both in profile. They were totally unaware that I was there, and that's part of the fun for me. New York City. Get a rope. This is my wife, Nikki. This is my wife, Nikki, because we had a 2-hour layover in Nashville, which wasn't time enough to get from the airport to anything that we want to do in Nashville. So we just walked around and found ourselves at the rooftop of the Hilton at the airport. And this is the Canon 50mm lens from 1960 on the digital, which becomes a 75mm. So I did some portrait shots of a pretty girl. as one does, as one does. And she usually spazzes and blinks and makes weird faces for the camera, but I got some good ones, I think. I was doing very shallow depth of field on these to make sure I could still get sharp focus with shallow depth of field manual. And I think I got it. That's my favorite one of hers. That's my wife, folks. That's Nikki. Then we eventually got to Arizona real late in the day, and this is about 7 o'clock at night, I guess, 7:30. By the time we got into Casa Grande, which is the closest town to where her folks live, and we stopped at a place to get a cheeseburger, and I saw the late afternoon sun hitting both this tree and this hybrid truck behind. The front half is a Jeep, and the back half is a Chevy cab, and the whole thing was painted tan with a brush. So it was all brush strokes, and it was like two different models of Jeep and a Chevy bed, and it had been converted to run on propane, as the guy was proud to tell me. And I just thought it was very, welcome to Arizona, here's your color scheme. So I got these shots. They're not great photographs. Not every photograph I'm going to show you is a great photograph or something that I would normally keep. So some of them are just documents of our trip, which are for memories. And some of them I'm actually proud of. The next morning I got up and walked around Casa Grande's old, I say Casa Grande because that's what they say there. I kept wanting to say Casa Grande, but they say Casa Grande, and just wandering around the old city in the morning. And again, the colors are different there. I ducked into this old barber shop. Those guys were awesome. We hung out about 20 minutes, and they let me take pictures. And the guy getting his hair cut was interested in photography, so we just talked about photography. What do you mean Adobe for the win there, Wes? So got the obligatory in the mirror shot. And again, testing to see how sharp I could get a shallow depth of field with manual focus lens. I thought I caught the vibe nicely. I love those old chairs. The color of Adobe, or are you saying am I using the Adobe color in Lightroom? No, this is actually for this trip. I have almost every picture that's in color. I used a Kodak Gold film look profile from a company whose name escapes me, but I liked the way it rendered the reds and the oranges and the tans for this. It looks immensely better than actual Kodak Gold looks. Oh yeah, the color of the truck is the color of Arizona. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You're going to see a lot of that specific color in these photos. In Casa Grande, I walked around a corner and found that they have a neon sign park where they have a collection of old neon signs from various decades, so mostly the 40s through the 60s. And I took quite a few. Not all of them will be shown here because there was a lot of repetition, and I was trying to do less obvious shots like this one here. Taking a picture of the Photoshop sign would have been very obvious to me, so I wanted to give it some depth here. So I don't even know what kind of plant this is. My phone would tell me, but I thought it was pretty to have that large amount of green and then the blue sky, because there's so much tan everywhere. Similarly here, I wanted to emphasize the greenery and the soft blue, and all the benches here of the Neon Park were made from the tailgates of trucks. So this is one of them. And some of these photos, like this one and some later ones where I took out in the desert, I'm probably going to do some further edits to increase the sense of depth. These are just color corrected. These I just apply the color profile and tweak the exposure a little bit, and that's it. but I think some of these will benefit from some localized contrast adjustments to give a better sense of depth. Ocotillo. Okay, I didn't know Nocotillo. Well, now I know that's Nocotillo. Thanks, guys. Gracias. But if I were to, one of the things I've learned is that things that are inherently interesting to us, because we're seeing, most of us, a stereoscopic vision, aren't as interesting if you close one eye and see what the camera sees, because you don't have this ever-changing slight parallax shift, and so our depth gets thrown off. And so in photos like this, where I'm showing everything at once, and this is, I'm sure, f8, so it's a very deep depth of field, we don't have that same sense of depth like you see here, and so it becomes a little bit boring. So I need to do some editing to the local mid contrast to give a bit of that back that we see with the eye that the camera lens does not see. So this is not anything noteworthy, but I like the colors. Ocotillo, the Oaxacan coati from Orinoco. Haha. The signs do line up. They do light up. They have had them all restored, and I will show those later. I got some night shots. I came back with Nikki later. This one I liked, the old furniture sign. And again, it's just capturing the colors of the place. It's not a great photograph, but it tells me where I was, and I see this and I feel the way it was. Food City. I was lucky enough where the cars in front were the same color. And you can choose to take this as a political photograph or not. But Japan has a neon sign museum. It's called Japan. Desert Rose, all right. Anyway, welcome to Food City. And it was early in the morning and already that bright where the sun hit. And I liked the colors of these buildings next to each other. Looked like Neapolitan ice cream. And again, this is a relatively unedited photo. I can exaggerate the vibrance, but I've not touched the vibrance. Except for some black and whites, nothing has really been edited. Just had a color profile chosen and slight exposure changes, and once or twice little crops. And all this, like, if I bring up the midtones and tweak the vibrance, this will look a lot better. But I like to have, I've learned to have some time between taking a photo and really editing a photo. Or it also tells me when I don't need to touch it, like this brick wall with the, I guess, gasworks in front of it. This is where there used to be an outlet mall, which has been out of business for 15 years. And this was part of the supply for that mall. But, you know, I don't know why they painted them all these vibrant colors, but I saw them and I'm like, thank you. I had not seen Ocotillo, to my knowledge, before this trip, and I did not know the name of it, but it's beautiful. I like when things are seemingly delicate and green and fragile in such a hostile place. This one I should have changed to my wide lens to get the effect I wanted with the signs looming, but I liked all the power lines. But this is not a great photograph, but it does remind me what it felt like to be there. And this, and again, I'm still playing around with depth of field and landscape. This is probably f4. Let's see if I have the information on this. I think it's f4. At 2.8, okay. Close. How do you close this? I guess I hit that button again. So I guess this was 2.8. It's, you know, because I got tired of having all my f8 shots, everything in focus, and nothing interesting as a result. And this is after a long time of learning to trust f8 for street stuff. I found that for landscapes, it's tricky unless the light is really good. So here, we're definitely definitely you can see what's in focus and where it gets soft, but it doesn't look like a bokeh monster kind of thing. And then out on the other side of that wall where all the colored stuff was there, the other side of the wall, there's this old couch left out. I'm sure someone's been very comfortable there. I decided not to touch any of those surfaces, but I was hoping it'd be more interesting. I would have liked to have been much farther away from the couch to get it in context, but there was, where I was here, there was a wall to my back, and that's where I could stand, and I didn't feel like changing to the wide lens just for that one shot, because I knew it was not going to be winning any prizes. But oh yeah, I saw a lot of creosotes out here, a lot of creosotes. Yeah, you want to buy some desert? I know a guy. This one I liked. I liked this as a just as a color study. The train was going by, and I saw this old whatever the hell it is. I mean, it looks kind of like uh, maybe a droid, but the train was going by and had all the light posts, and this even I even made a conscious choice to have that stop sign in the bit of wall over there on the right. This is more of a compositional color study than anything that might mean anything to anyone else, but I like it. And then subsequent one just to see what it would look like with everything in focus. And I liked the graffiti on the train. This lens is incredible. I wish you guys were seeing this the way I'm seeing it. You're seeing it at 1080p and usually on small devices, but this is a very nice sensor and a very nice lens. This is the welcome to Casa Grande sign with all the businesses, with the Optimus International and the Masons and the Kiwanis and the Lions and Elks, etc. This guy was sitting next to that welcome to Casa Grande sign, and he had a small table set up. He was selling knives and knickknacks and used shit and with 2 American flags. And I asked him if I could take a portrait, and he said, sure. I snapped off a few, and the wind cooperated. So, hey, Brad, yeah, creosote is a plant and what we call tar as well. But yeah, creosote's a desert plant. Hey, Alan, yeah, this is the XE5, which is my favorite digital body. I love my Canon 5D, but that thing is too big to take on a trip. Doesn't fit in a bag easily. I've got my other digital is a Nikon D5300, which is junk in comparison to either of the other two. But yeah, for this trip, I just took the XE5 with I'm going to give you the focal length equivalency lenses with a 40, a 28, and a 75. So, hey, Spruce Streak, appreciate that. But anyway, I like this one a lot. That's a good one. And I got this one. I knew I got it in the moment. And I took another one, but the other one wasn't as interesting as the first two. This is my father-in-law, and this one was taken. I gave him the digital, but I put the 50 millimeter Canon lens from 1960 on. I have an adapter, so it gave me 75 mil. You saw the ones with Nikki earlier. And interesting, I forgot that I had been shooting I had black and white loaded, the double X loaded, and I had a yellow filter on. And I forgot I had a yellow filter. So for these first color ones, the yellow filter worked really well until I get outside. You'll see that. So again, very shallow depth of field, just the natural light coming from the windows. That's his dog, Cooper. Cooper's very photogenic. That's my mother-in-law, Nancy. She's wonderful. She will not like this photograph because you can see that she is not 20 years old. But thank you, cats, man. Thank you, Catalan. Go get your mama. That's important. So I just wanted to capture the quiet moments. I got a lot more pictures of the family on film, but I'm waiting to get those developed. Blue glow is no issue, J Fops. That's usually a glow rarely corresponds to a problem. It can, but it's not anything to worry about. So these are just casual portraits of the family as they're talking to each other. And I really like the light, and because the light coming in was afternoon sunlight, I didn't even realize or see through the lens that I had a yellow filter on, and I just did a slight color white balance correction, and that's all that was necessary for these. But then I went outside, and this is what happens when you take a picture of a blue sky and green cacti with a yellow filter on your lens, and everything goes a little surreal. And as a result, I love it, but it is very much a choice, and I took it off for the rest of it. But I do like this one picture a lot. It just looks surreal and hyper real at the same time. So this is him without the yellow filter. This is him with the yellow filter. White balance can do an awful lot. It couldn't do anything for that. I didn't ask it to. So, but for a 60-year-old camera, it does look like pickles. It looks like gherkins, but for not a 60-year-old camera, but for a 60-year-old lens. And granted, you guys are seeing this at a lower resolution than I am, but for a 60-year-old lens, it's really good. Thank you, Canon. Thank you for making a lens that I can get for $100 now that does this. Same camera, same lens, but because the light was not great, well, the colors were not great here, I did black and white. Cooper really liked Nikki a lot. A lot. And Nikki wanted to show off her new frames, so, you know. I went to get everyone lunch. On the left here, this is in a place called Eloy, Arizona. On the left is a place called Nico's that does some of the best burritos I've ever had in my life. I got a burrito and 4 tacos. They were huge to bring back for everyone to share. And on the right there, La Michoacana Monaca, La Casa de Nieve. And I saw the local girls going in there and one smiling at me. And I'm like, aha, I'm so glad I studied Spanish. Because I knew that in addition to taking pictures, while I ordered here at Nico's and they were getting my food ready, I could go next door. Aha, strawberry ice cream. It was like 103 already that day. So the strawberry ice cream was life support. But it also matched the color scheme of the day. I love the vibrant colors there. I also love the burrito. They had these very sharp leaves making this pattern, but the sunlight at this time of day was kind of weird, so I did black and white just for the lines and textures. Are we still there? Seem to be. All right. I found in Casa Grande this frontier cemetery. So this cemetery predates the town, and most of the graves are just stones, you know, and the ones which are actual stones are old. And they have their own porta potty in the cemetery, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, Palmetto, that's right. And the structure behind here, there used to be a cattle farm, and those were fans to keep the cows cool during the day. The cows are gone, but the shrouds flapping in the breeze remain. This is the view on the other side of the road from that frontier cemetery. And I was happier with this landscape than many of the others because the light was in my favor, and the light gave it layers without me doing anything extraneous. And this is towards dusk. The next morning, I got up very early to go out by myself to take some pictures at a archaeological site, which you'll see in a little bit. But I took the long way there just to see what I would not normally see. And I found this, I don't know if it's an old hotel, a motel, or an old homestead or what, but it was all burnt out and falling apart. Obviously it had had a fire, so I got out and took as many pictures as I could. And because of the poor light, I decided black and white was the play, because otherwise everything would be very muted because the sun had not really come up yet, and I just love the texture and sense of time and dryness. And the way the old creosotes, like this is an old creosote and it's just all twisted up on itself. Everything out there in the desert shows that it's a harsh place to live. And sometimes things last and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, they go down and they get dicks drawn on them. Someone came to that beautiful site and thought, I know, I need to draw a bad cock and balls on this. And then my friend needs to do it in white. I just don't understand the human brain. It's just, this is one I was pleased with. This is the one I used for the thumbnail. This is someone's homestead just behind the burnt out place, and they had the saguaro, and the shaft of light was cutting through the clouds, and you can see the rain coming on the left, and the crow was flying at the upper right, and had the leading lines of the road, and the creosote leading to the house. But I also knew that this was someone's homestead out in the fucking desert outside of any town in Arizona. And they lived far away from people for a goddamn reason. And if I came any closer, I might find what their views on the Second Amendment were. So I did not come any closer. I also thought that this was the atmosphere that I needed to get anyway. So I got the shot without getting shot. That's a good day. Yeah, it's a nice place for elf owls. I was hoping that we might have any opportunity to go out in the desert at night, but Nikki had things to do, and then she was scared of the wild pigs, so we did not. But so no elf owls for us, even if we would have been able to see any. Hey, sorry, not Catalan. I might do a book later, but I don't know. It seems egotistical. I'm still getting getting my shit together. I have a few. I have like 4 or 5 good photos so far in the past year and a half. Most of them are technically good photos of inherently interesting things without being actually good photos on themselves of themselves. I imagine if I took this on HP5 or FP4, it'd look a lot like this. Um, this one especially would look. This is I pushed the digital to look kind of like HP5. Um, that's kind of the vibe. I just love all the twisted old dead branches there, and the kind of I think of it as Indian design on that concrete box there. I would love to see some elf owls. That was I believe you about ravens versus crows in general, but that was not a raven. I saw it fly closer to me. It was that one was a crow. I love ravens, and I would have changed out to a long lens if there had been ravens to photograph on this trip for me. I'm sure they're in the area, but I sure heard a lot of crows and a lot of grackles. Yeah, Ansel Adams called it a good year if you got 3 or 4 photos. Yeah, I mean, I think these are. I'm doing well. I'm on the right track, but like this to me is really approaching being a very nice photograph. This is interesting, but no, not groundbreaking. I like same here. I did everything right. It's just not a met. The stars did not align, and on this one, it's been done better, you know. But it was my shot to do it. And you got to get desert is different than street. Landscape is different than streets. And I have not done a lot of deep landscape work, so this was an opportunity, and it shows where I have work to do. But this one, I liked all the angles and lines. and the very muted desert colors and the muted desert sky, and then the green and the red of the signs just superimposed on top of everything. It's not a great photograph, but I was trying to see. And here again, I don't get an opportunity to shoot this kind of scene very often in Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, and the horizon probably could be straightened out a little bit, but I tend not to worry about it so much. That's how I saw it at the time. That's how it felt at the time. And I do like the layers with the haze. I'm not going to put, I don't think I'm going to put Ansel Adams out of business with this shot, but I love Salgado. Salgado's fantastic. I need to find, I need to study him more. I haven't seen as much as I should, but yeah, there's rude graffiti everywhere. Well, in Pompeii, it was ritualized, but yeah. Uh, let's see, any questions? Thanks, Catalan. I'm working on it. But I've got a whole bunch of books in the other room from the, you know, real serious photographers, and I look through those and I'm like, okay, got to keep working at it, chipping away at it. This was a coffee shop and plant nursery in Coolidge, Arizona, because I was waiting for the national park to open that I was going to. And I just like the colors here on this rainy day. You don't get many rainy days in the desert, but the colors were so vibrant. The world was just a softbox, and all the colors were like, we're here. Like this, I don't even know what kind of tree this is because I don't know the desert well enough, and the phone didn't tell me on this one. But I love the texture. It looks like I opened a portal to Japan or something. But again, just those colors were so pretty, even with an overcast sky. Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to trek through the desert to with a wet plate and a giant wooden box camera, etc. Oh, crows and ravens are incredibly intelligent. But when we get through the photos, and I'll tell you my raven story at the Tower of London, where I'm like, okay, they're smarter than most people I know. This was an old Japanese van, mini van, the smallest minivan I've ever seen. I think it was a Subaru, and it was intrinsically interesting, but I didn't care about the car so much as I like the angles and color repetition here. Honey Musket. Okay, I'll look that up. Now her folks moved here later. Her folks are from the Midwest, and then they moved to Grand Junction, Colorado for a long time, and then they found their way down here to Casa Grande area. But this one I just like the colors. So Honey Musket. I'll look that up. It was beautiful bark. And again, just the colors and textures while I was waiting for the park to open, just seeing what I could see. And I had a carniceria down the street, and the colors were really difficult on this building and in the shadows. So I did black and white, and again kind of pushed it to look like pushed HP5 like that. I just like it with the soot on the wall. There's the bull, which almost looks cretin. Hey, Alan, mesquite and mesquite are both acceptable pronunciations. Mesquite is more common, but I was just hanging out in Casa Grande where they say mesquite. Regional pronunciations are funny. Yeah, I like this. It looks like a torture rack of some sort. Maybe if you're, I'm sure if you're the thing about to be barbecued, you are. But gas station across the street. I don't think I really got it. It doesn't really pop, but the lighting was so iffy at sunrise. Miss Kiwi, what? I'll let you have the honey ants. This is the entrance to the Casa Grande ruins where I wanted to go. And I just was waiting for that gate to open. And I'm like, well, hell, I'm going to take a picture of the gate I'm waiting to open. So I remember this moment 10 years from now. And then I got in to see the Casa Grande ruins. And this is from the 1300s. This is 14th century, pre-Columbian big house, which is why Casa Grande is named Casa Grande. And the steel protective top was added apparently in 1932. I was hoping for some even better shots, but they didn't open the park till 9, so I missed the best of the morning, and I couldn't go back, and they would have closed before sunrise or sunset anyway. So I bet if you go here in the winter, when the sunrise comes late and sunset comes early, you get better shots. But I just wanted to see what I could do. Pigeon up there, a little detail. They've got some modern support added, you can see, and some genius scratched some graffiti into it to scale this. I don't know this woman. She was there at the same time I was, but this gives you a sense of the scale of the structure. Only, the top third of the structure is barely there these days. It was very, very large for the 14th century Mesoamerica, immediately pre-Columbian by 200 years. This is me playing around with angles. I wanted to try to get the mountain there in the gap, but I don't think the perspective is as good as that one. And maybe I should have gone a little bit far more right. Anyway, then I changed to the wide angle to get a better sense of the thing. You see that sky that day was so overcast because the rain was coming in. It's raining behind that structure off on the mountains. That was rain. But the entire light that day was like a softbox as a result. That roof is just huge. I'm glad they added it. And that's the visitor center / museum. And their many structures kind of look like termite mounds, but all those walls used to be other buildings and workshops, and there was a market. This is another Eggleston in the desert. I figured wouldn't be too many rain puddles in that region to give me reflection, so I need to get a reflection while I could. So this is the Eggleston, and this is the trying to tie the roofs together. It didn't quite work with it. I had a notion about the angles and the bright colors and everything, but I think this one has a little more impact. It's landscape and architecture are difficult. People and stories are easier. Then on the way back to where my in-laws lived, I saw this ranch that had what at first glance looked like millions of white rocks. You can see those in the background. And then I saw some that were swoopy and swirly. I'm like, oh my God, that's like all the gourds in the world. I took a bunch of pictures. I only have like 3 here, but just it's a gourd farm. You don't think about it, but there are places with easily 500,000 gourds, And that was an old drunk wagon the guy bought from an old police department, he said. And they sell gourd art, of course. I took a picture but did not buy any gourd art. It would not have fit in my carry-on. Later that afternoon, I took Nikki and my mother-in-law, Nancy, up to Lake. I was not Lake anything. Sorry, Picacho Peak, which is a pretty interesting mountain. One of the taller mountains there, and apparently the site of the last Civil War battle because it took a month and a half for the news of the Appomattox to travel to the Union and Confederate forces who are still trying to kill each other, dug in on the side of this mountain. So again, I'm struggling with landscape. I don't have enough contrast. It doesn't look interesting enough, but that's what it looked like to the eye, except for with our eye, we have that stereoscopic shift to everything. So again, I'm going to try to learn how to edit this a little bit better, play around with some mid-range contrast to give some more depth. I mean, the camera did everything great. It's just the light was not fantastic. This is part of the mountain. This is the smaller of the two peaks. It's much higher than it seems. And you can see by the size of the saguaros, some of those saguaros up on that ridge line are 20 plus feet high. I wish that saguaro in this photo were to the left or the right, so we would not be giving a middle finger to the mountain. But I could not move to my right or left because to my right was a car, to my left was a huge creosote. I wanted to stay here and do like panoramic shots and all, but my mother-in-law was getting hot even in the air-conditioned car, just sitting there. So I had to take these digitals and leave. I had already finished a whole roll of double X, mostly on this mountain. So when I get the black and whites and the film photos, I should have some better ones. Yeah, I can emulate the graduated NDs with in Lightroom. I just have not yet. Hey Satchmo, I don't know how long they lived there, or even what years they lived there. I think they've been here for the past 10 years in the Eloy Casa Grande area. Yeah, I don't know if I want to start carrying around a bunch of ND filters when I go places. If I were traveling to the West to take photographs, if I was on a photographic journey, I totally would. I'm trying to work in actual photography in and around a family visit, so I took one small rangefinder film camera, one small rangefinder style digital camera, and 3 lenses, and I all fit in a small bag, and I had a yellow filter. That's it. That's all. And this phone. That's all I needed. This one I was pleased with. It's not a staggeringly great photograph, but getting that dynamic range, I thought I did everything as well as I could given the time. This is all handheld stuff, and I probably should have gone to the wide lens for some of this stuff. But like I said, my mother-in-law was in the car, and she was giving me the wouldn't it be nice to go get something cold to drink kind of code. Is there Aunt Peyote out there? I don't know. I didn't ask any. But these are just reminders to me of what it felt like to be there. I would not be showing anyone these photos and saying, "Look at these great photos." However, right around the corner on old, I think part of what used to be Route 66, if not a similar time period, they had all these remnants of old businesses. I think these need a little bit more color editing just to get things just dialed in perfectly. But this is what the camera saw. For those of you who haven't done a lot of modern color editing, you know that if this is what the camera saw, I can make these even better. It'd be interesting seeing a comparison between what a phone would capture versus a film camera. Well, a phone would lose out to film or digital on a real camera. The glass is just garbage in comparison to what I have. You almost lost a truck at Picajo Lake. Okay. Ouch. Yeah. Well, if you don't have any water until it comes all at you at once, I imagine it would be a dangerous. Yeah, Picacho Peak. All right, so they're seeing those. I was just playing around with different compositional takes on this. And then that night, I took Nikki to see the neon park as it was lighting up, and we were there for the golden hour. but a big dust storm was coming in to get us. But until it did, I was really pleased with some of these images. Just just gorgeous. And then the neon sign there says Sunset Court. So this picture is kind of a see and say. But I mean, these colors, these are straight out of camera, pretty much. Minor tweaks, nothing really worked up. This is waiting for the sun to go down and the lights to all come on, and they started to accommodate us. Ralph's Cafe. Nikki thinks I should have taken one without that bit of tree branch in front. I kind of like it. I can see your point, though. This is an old. It was like Mad Men should have been set there across the way from where we were. And this was our favorite building we saw. But it's especially at this time of day, I thought it was just kind of timeless and surreal. Hey, Green Mystic Surfer. People do develop film in a darkroom at home. Most of us don't use a full darkroom. There are easier ways to do it because we're not usually doing film prints where we need a darkroom with enlargers and developers and all that. We're just doing home development, which can be done in a tank. So it's a lightproof tank that you don't have to physically be in a lightproof place. And then you can, once they're done, that you can do the scans. But yeah, something about that storm light. Just capturing all the decay. And the light was getting really funky as the storm was coming closer to us. So we just walked a little bit, and it was interesting to me the clarity certain things had, while other things were kind of shrouded. This is one of the last shots that night. It's just a smoke shot, but I wanted to see how the camera did at night photography. It did really, really well. This was a shot from inside the car as the dust storm was hitting us. This is right before the world went black. This is not a great photograph. I was trying to see if I could rescue it. The light the next morning was just so flat that nothing for a while had any real interest. I'd try. This was just a reminder of the trip photo. Nothing great there. It's outside a bookstore, unsurprisingly. Inside the bookstore, they had a whole bunch of baskets for sale. And History of Casa Grande, the mural, which is beautiful, but the light was so awful. I didn't try to take pictures of it as mementos of what they actually look like, just a reminder of that's there, and that's what it felt like. This one I had higher hopes for, but the light wasn't in my favor for this one. I got some other ones on film of a different VFW at a different town I went to on this trip. I have hopes for that one. What looks like flecks of dust in my photo, that's raindrops. Rain sometimes just shows up as specks. Here it is in spec mode. Do I collect books? I have many books. I don't collect books in terms of having a huge collection. I used to, but I collect the ones that I need to revisit a lot in my life. This one on the way home that night, the sun was peeping out after the storm left. The sun came back out, and we had a second sunset. I thought it was the quality of light was nice here. And again, at this time of day, I'm getting depth pre-built into the landscapes. But all the stuff I did in the full bright sun, I need to figure out some editing tricks to make them have any visual interest at all. This is another night in the same area of downtown Casa Grande, and the light wasn't as dramatic, and so the photo's not as good. So we went to get a beer. We'd already had an early dinner with her folks, so we went to this little place to have a beer, and they have a cactus garden out back with all the lights and everything. I thought it was kind of neat. We've been here once before a long time ago. The light was difficult that night. It was really dark, but the sensor on this camera is just insanely good. And as we were walking out of the restaurant, the sun was almost gone, got the palm tree in silhouette, and I don't know if you guys can see in the resolution you're watching or the screen size, but I didn't just get the crescent moon, but to the right of it on the other side of the cloud, there's a planet that's visible while the sun is still up in the sky, just barely. So, and then last shot of the barber shop that night. And then the next morning we went to Phoenix because we had some time before I had to go to the airport, and I was pretty underwhelmed with Phoenix, though we did see the Westward Ho, which was a formerly Grand Hotel. The opening scene of Psycho was apparently filmed there. I need to rewatch Psycho, and is now a home for elderly people who on assisted living. So I'm glad they're doing that. The silhouette, yeah, I'm pleased with this. And again, this is out of camera. I didn't do anything to this, so. Yeah, I didn't take any pictures of exciting Sky Harbor Airport, but I do like the structure where the rental car return is. It's a pretty swoopy mid-century kind of thing. But I like this. I like the facade of this building. Let's see how this camera and lens do. I'm not sure how you guys will see this out there in 1080 land, but this is at 400%. And given that I added some grain to the black and white, I'm pleased with that clarity. This is the television tower on top of that building. And this is their rail system. I had a better picture lined up, but Nikki tugged my arm because she thought I was going to walk into a street and get hit by a car, which I was not, but I missed a really cool shot, and I'll never let her forget that because she wanted to save my life or some bullshit like that. Oh, the rental car return, what I'm talking about, Richard? Yeah. The rest of it's not very interesting, but that canopy is. And this is the same building from a distance. The rest of Phoenix is either just boring skyrises, or downtown Phoenix at least, boring skyrises or fake Nashville. Like they're aiming for New York or Tokyo and came up short. I'm sure there's some lovely stuff outside of downtown we did not get a chance to explore. There was something that I had said that when we got to the end of this part, I would discuss. I don't recall what that was now. I have no memory of what that was. Sorry. If anyone wants to jog my memory before we wrap up, though you guys have been here a really long time. I wish I could do these streams reliably in 4K, but when I do them in 4K, and I have the technology, but YouTube does such a time delay between when I say something, what you hear, and between when you type something and when I see it, it just throws everything off. The mural was Wallace and Ladmo. Oh, the mural in Phoenix. Cool. I'll look it up. I was wondering about that. The Raven story. Thank you, Lou. All right. So when we were in London, we went to the Tower of London. Not because tourists go to the Tower of London, but because history miners go to the Tower of London and know what they're seeing, and have to go to the Tower of London. Also did a lot of Shakespeare, half of which is set there. So anyway, Nikki and I are up on the walls outside the tower over Trader's Gate, and I took her up there so she could have a view of Tower Bridge and the wharf. And we turned around, and we're looking out over the courtyard there by the Wakefield Tower, And we noticed a little boy sitting on a bench eating some chicken nuggets. And next to the boy was a trash can, and standing on top of that trash can, watching the little boy's chicken nuggets, was one of the tower ravens. And they're this big. They're not small birds, and their beaks like this long. And it wasn't going to hurt that boy, but it was just watching every nugget. And it's eventually the boy's mother called him, and he had like 3 or 4 nuggets uneaten. He closed the box, threw it in the trash, and ran off. And that bird had flown away from the trash. Well, flopped, because he can't really fly, but flopped away from the trash bin when he threw it. Then he flopped himself back up. They can fly a little bit, but they have their wings clipped to some degree. But anyway, it got on the top of that trash can and just started looking down and thinking. And it didn't go down in the trash can to get the chicken nuggets. It didn't do anything to make itself messy. It studied it for a minute, and then it reached down with its beak and it pulled up the trash can liner about 3 or 4 inches. And then with its beak, it put it down and it stepped on it with its foot. And then he reached down and picked up the trash can liner, picked the whole thing up on another for 3 or 4 inches, bring it over the edge, step down with his foot. So he's just edging the trash bin liner higher and higher until it gets to the top. And he's standing there and he's holding the trash bin liner up with his feet, and there are the nuggets. And he takes the box and he flicks it out of the trash bin and then lands on the ground next to it, opens the box, and he has his chicken nuggets. And I have seen a lot of people who try to fix amps who could not have solved that puzzle as well as he did. So anyway, that's the Raven story. Waiting for applause. Yeah, they can totally open zippers. I've seen scientists say they think they probably have the equivalent intelligence of a 3-year-old child, if not a little bit more. And they have, while they cannot speak, they can understand words enough to have a fairly extensive vocabulary, and they like certain people and they dislike certain people. So don't piss them off, because again, they're about this big. They got a beak about that long, and they're smarter than many voters here in America. All right, I'm going to go. I want you guys to go. I want you all to have a good week. They're smart enough to know that PCBs are good. Well, it depends on what the ISS number is. Don't you agree, Brad? Anyway, see you guys.